There is a war being fought over you right now, and the first casualty was your awareness that it exists. You think you know the battlefield. You think the fight is about your behavior, the temper you can't seem to bury, the habit that keeps resurrecting itself, the prayer life that runs hot and cold, the version of you that shows up on Sunday, and the one that drives home Monday. You think the war is about sin, catching it, killing it, confessing it, repeating. You've been told, in 100 subtle ways, that if you could just get your behavior under control, you'd finally be at peace. That entire framing is the deception. I want to tell you something before we go one sentence further, because it reorganizes everything that comes after it. The war is not about your sin. The war is about your identity. The enemy is not primarily trying to make you do bad things. He is trying, with everything he has, with every resource left to a defeated power, to keep you from knowing one fact about yourself: that you are a son of God. Read that again and feel how small it sounds against the size of the claim. One fact. That's the whole objective. Not 1,000 sins, not a moral collapse, not your eternal address. One fact suppressed. Because a son who knows he's a son is the single most dangerous thing in the enemy's universe, and a son who doesn't know it is harmless to him. Busy, religious, exhausted, and harmless. Let me dismantle the second lie quickly, because it's load-bearing for all the others. You think you're fighting for victory. You're not. You're standing on one. The decisive battle of this war was fought 2,000 years ago on a Roman cross outside Jerusalem, and it was won so completely that the question of the outcome has never been reopened. Paul says it without flinching. God disarmed the powers and authorities. He made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. Colossians 2:15. Disarmed. Spectacle. Triumph. These are not the words of a contest still in progress. They are the words a war correspondent uses after the surrender is signed. Hold that next to one of the strangest verses in the New Testament. Jesus, watching 70 ordinary people come back from a ministry trip, says, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven," Luke 10:18. Lightning doesn't negotiate. Lightning doesn't mount a counterattack. Lightning is the description of something already over before you registered the flash. So here is the situation you actually woke up inside of. The enemy has no path to victory. None. The cross didn't wound him, it ended him. He cannot win. He cannot reverse the verdict, retake the ground, or undo the resurrection. He has exactly one move left. He can lie. Picture an army that has already lost the war, but refuses to leave the field. The capital has fallen. The commander is captured. There is no scenario in which they win, and they know it. What does an army like that do? It can't fight to win, that option is gone. So it switches campaigns entirely. It stops trying to take ground and starts trying to keep the enemy from knowing it already lost. It runs disinformation. It forges documents. It impersonates command and issues fake orders. It floods the radio with static so the real signal can't get through. Its entire war effort becomes a single counterintelligence operation aimed at one outcome: keep the other side from discovering the war is already over. That is precisely, exactly, what you are up against. Not a power. A propaganda machine. The devil's post-Calvary career is not warfare in any honest sense. It's the longest con in history, a counterintelligence operation with one classified objective: suppress the fact that you are a son of God, because the moment that intel reaches you, his whole occupation collapses. This is why Sun Tzu is our lens. 25 centuries ago, a Chinese general wrote 13 short chapters on war, and the sentence that towers over all of them is this: all warfare is based on deception. He didn't say warfare involves deception. He said it is based on it. That deception is the foundation, the substructure, the thing the whole edifice of war rests upon. For most generals, that was one tool among many. For your enemy, after the cross, it is the only tool he has left. Sun Tzu described a principle. Satan was reduced to it. So we're going to read his playbook the way Sun Tzu read war. Coldly, strategically, looking for the deception underneath every move, because there is always a deception underneath every move. Here is the shift that will carry you through this entire book, and I want you to make it now, in the prologue, before the chapters start. You think you've been drafted as a soldier. You picture the Christian life as combat, gear up, take ground, fight the good fight, hold the line, exhausted and bloodied but faithful. That picture isn't wrong because fighting isn't real. It's wrong because it puts you on the wrong job. You are not a soldier in this war. You are an intelligence analyst, A soldier's job is to take ground. An analyst's job is to see the truth, to look at the noise, the feints, the forged orders, the planted stories, and discern what is actually happening. And in a war whose only weapon is deception, the analyst is more dangerous than any soldier. Because you cannot defeat a lie with effort. You can only defeat it by seeing through it. The decisive weapon in this entire conflict is not what you do. It's what you know. Jesus said it plainly. You will know the truth and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. Not the truth will exhaust you into freedom. Not the truth will give you a checklist. The truth known sets you free. That word, know, is the most militarized word in your arsenal, and the enemy spends every resource keeping you from it. He doesn't care how hard you work as long as you don't know who you are. He'll happily let you be a busy soldier forever. What he cannot survive is you becoming a clear-eyed analyst who reads his moves and says, "That's a lie, and I see the truth it's hiding." Before we name the fact, sit for a moment in what its suppression has already cost you, because the price is the proof. Think about the believer who has been at this for 20 years and is tired in a way sleep doesn't touch. Not lazy. The opposite. He prays, he serves, he shows up, he gives, he tries, and underneath all of it runs a low current of "I'm not quite there yet," a sense that the approval is always one obedience away. He's not failing. He's exhausted by succeeding at the wrong thing. That fatigue is not a character flaw. It is the signature of a man fighting for a victory he already owns, paying daily for ground that was deeded to him for free. Now think about the other believer, the one who did fail, loudly, and never came back, because the failure seemed to confirm what the static had been whispering all along. You were never really one of them. He didn't leave over an argument about doctrine. He left because the one fact never reached him with enough force to outweigh the lie. And when the crisis came, the lie was the only thing in the room. Two very different men. Same operation run against both. One was kept busy and the other was kept ashamed, and the enemy did not care which. Because in neither man did the one fact ever land as fact. That's the cost. Not just bad behavior. Wasted sonship. Years of a free son living like a hired hand, or a beloved son living like an exile. Both of them strangers to the only thing that would have changed everything. Keep that price in view. It is the strongest evidence that something is being deliberately withheld. So let me set the question that the rest of this book exists to answer. I want you to hold it the way you'd hold a piece of classified intel that, if true, changes the entire war. What if the entire kingdom of darkness exists to suppress one fact about you? Not to drag you into a list of sins. Not to send you somewhere terrible when you die. Those are downstream. What if every temptation, every accusation, every wave of condemnation, every religious system, every try harder, every you're not enough, every flicker of does God even like me? What if all of it is not 100 separate problems, but a single coordinated operation with one classified objective? What if it's all disinformation in service of burying one fact? That the cross already made you a son, that the Father already calls you his own, that the verdict is in and it reads beloved. If that's true, and I'm going to spend this whole book showing you it's true, then almost everything you've been taught to fight is a decoy. The sin is a decoy. The striving is a decoy. The endless self-improvement is a decoy. They are noise generated to keep you off the one signal that ends the war. Romans 8 says the Spirit himself testifies with your spirit that we are God's children. Romans 8:16. Notice that even God's strategy centers on this one fact. The Spirit's testimony isn't first about your behavior, it's about your identity. The Father is broadcasting one message into the static. You are mine. The enemy is jamming that exact frequency. The whole war is fought over a single transmission. Sun Tzu opens The Art of War by saying war is the province of life and death, the road to safety or to ruin, something that demands study. It cannot be approached carelessly. Neither can this. Over the next 13 chapters, we're going to take his book and read the enemy's campaign through it, front by front. We'll sit in on the enemy's war council and watch him lay his plans. Chapter 1. We'll see why he can't afford a fair fight and wages a long, exhausting attrition war on you instead. Chapter 2. We'll uncover the trap most sons get stuck on: mixture, law blended with grace, the most sophisticated disinformation in his arsenal. We'll stand on what Sun Tzu called death ground, and discover that for a son it's the safest place on earth, because you fight from a death you've already died, and a life you've already been raised into. And we'll learn the strangest rule of this whole war: you are not earning a future victory. You are defending a finished one. But it starts here, with the realignment. Put down the rifle. Pick up the file. You were never the soldier the enemy needed you to think you were. You're the analyst he's terrified of. Because here is the thing about a war built entirely on deception. It only works as long as you don't read the playbook. You're about to read the playbook. And the war you didn't know you were in is about to become the war you can no longer lose. Before the first arrow flew, Sun Tzu sat his generals down at a table. That's what Chapter 1 of The Art of War is: not a battle, a briefing. Before you mobilize a single soldier, he says, you make a sober calculation. You weigh 5 constant factors. You assess the enemy's strengths, your own, the ground, the timing, the leadership. You run the numbers in the temple before the campaign, and the general who wins makes many calculations before the battle is fought. Battles are decided at the planning table. Combat just collects what the calculation already won. I want you to grasp something uncomfortable. A war council met about you. You were assessed, studied, profiled. Before you knew there was a war, a strategic assessment was run on your life. Your wiring, your wounds, your theology, the exact frequency of doubt you're most likely to believe. And out of that assessment, a campaign was laid. Peter doesn't soften it. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. 1 Peter 5:8. Prowls. Looking for. That's not random predation. That's reconnaissance. That's an analyst at table, laying plans. And here is the line from Sun Tzu's first chapter that tells you the whole nature of those plans before we examine one of them. All warfare is based on deception. He places it in the planning chapter on purpose. Deception isn't an improvisation in the field. It's baked into the strategy at the table. So when we reverse engineer the enemy's war council, we already know the shape of every plan we'll find. Each of the 5 factors will turn out to be a lie aimed at the same target: your knowledge that you are a son. Let's map his 5 fronts. Sun Tzu's first factor is the Tao, the moral law, the thing that causes the people to be in complete accord with their ruler. It's the alignment between an army and the one it serves. Win this, and they will follow him regardless of their lives. Lose it, and the army fractures from within. The whole campaign rests on whether the soldiers believe in the one they're fighting for. So the enemy's first move isn't aimed at your behavior. It's aimed at your picture of God. If he can distort the Father's character, make him cold, exacting, disappointed, a deity with his arms crossed and his foot tapping, then he's broken the alignment at its root. Because now you're fighting for a God you're secretly afraid is against you. You serve nervously. You obey to avoid wrath, not to delight a father. You read the Bible looking for the catch. But the cross already declared the Father's posture, and it isn't crossed arms. God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Romans 5:8. While we were still sinners. The verdict came down before you cleaned up. Paul drives the same nail in Romans 8:31. If God is for us, who can be against us? The enemy's entire first front depends on you never being sure of that for. Restore the Father's true face, and his first plan disintegrates. You can't be conscripted to fight a God who already gave his son for you. Sun Tzu's second factor is heaven, and he doesn't mean the sky. He means timing. Night and day, cold and heat, times and seasons. Heaven is when. Strike at the wrong moment and the strongest army loses. Strike at the right one and a small force wins. Timing is everything. So the enemy attacks your sense of when you became a son. Watch how surgical this is. He rarely tells you you'll never be a son, too obvious, too easy to reject. Instead, he moves your sonship into the future. Someday, if you grow enough. Eventually, once you've conquered that habit. When you finally feel close to God. He makes your identity a destination you're crawling toward instead of a fact you were born into. He shifts the verb from past tense to future tense, and the whole war turns on that one tense. Scripture is relentlessly past tense about this. You received the spirit of sonship, Romans 8:15. You are all sons of God through faith in Christ Jesus, Galatians 3:26. Now are we the sons of God, 1 John 3:2. Not becoming, now are. The enemy's second plan is a clock with the hands glued forward, always almost, never already. Reset the clock to finished, and his timing collapses. You don't strive toward sonship. You wake up inside one. Sun Tzu's third factor is earth, the ground. Distances, danger, and security, open ground and narrow passes. A good commander chooses where the battle happens, because terrain decides outcomes before the fighting starts. Fight uphill in the mud, boxed into a narrow pass, and your strength means nothing. Half of generalship is refusing to fight on ground that ruins you. The enemy cannot beat a son on the ground of grace, so he relocates the war to the ground of law. This is one of his most effective maneuvers, and almost nobody notices the relocation. On the terrain of grace, you stand on a finished work, you're unassailable, because the verdict is already in. So he lures you onto the terrain of law, where the rules are. You're only as accepted as your last performance, only as loved as your latest obedience, only as secure as today's score. On that ground, you're always disadvantaged. You can never get high enough. The law was engineered to expose, not to empower. Through the law we become conscious of sin, Romans 3:20. And here is the trap most sons spend years stuck in mixture. He rarely drags you fully back under law, he'd be exposed. He blends it. A little grace, a little law. Saved by grace, kept by effort. Paul loses his composure over exactly this. You foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? After beginning by the Spirit, are you now trying to attain your goal by human effort? Galatians 3:1-3. Bewitched, a word for a spell, a deception. Mixture is the enemy's favorite terrain, because it feels like balance while it functions like quicksand. Refuse the relocation. Stay on grace, where a son cannot be outflanked. Sun Tzu's fourth factor is the commander, leadership itself. Wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, strictness. An army is shaped by whoever it answers to. Change the commander, and you change the army, because soldiers become the image of the one they obey. So the enemy counterfeits lordship. He installs a different ruler over your inner life, fear. Watch who's actually giving the orders. If your devotion runs on dread of punishment, of falling short, of a God waiting to drop the hammer, then fear has staged a quiet coup. You're still religious, still active, but you're taking orders from a counterfeit commander. And fear is a brutal general. It never says well done, it only says not enough. Paul names the coup and reverses it in one stroke. You did not receive a spirit that makes you a slave again to fear, but you received the spirit of sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father, Romans 8:15. 2 commanders, 2 armies. One runs on fear and produces slaves. One runs on love and produces sons. Abba, the intimate word, a child's word, is the sound of the rightful commander retaking the chair. Perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. 1 John 4:18. Depose the counterfeit. A son serves a father, not a threat. Sun Tzu's fifth factor is method and discipline, the army's machinery. The marshalling of the army and its subdivisions, the graduations of rank, the maintenance of roads, the control of expenditure. Logistics. Org charts. The system that runs the whole apparatus. So the enemy hands you a religious system. And he does it because a system is infinitely easier to manage than a son. Sit with that, because it's the most cynical plan at the table. A son is unpredictable, alive, free, moved by love, impossible to control because he's secure in who he is. A system you can manage. Give a man enough rules, rituals, metrics, and tiers, and he'll spend his whole life inside the machinery and never once threaten the occupation. The system keeps him busy, measurable, and harmless. This is what Jesus exposed in the Pharisees, masters of the apparatus who shut the door of the kingdom in people's faces. Matthew 23:13. The most disciplined religious system on earth, and the most spiritually blind. Paul calls the system a form of godliness but denying its power. 2 Timothy 3:5. The machinery runs, the life is gone. The enemy doesn't mind you being religious. He prefers it. A son in a system is a son he's filed away. Walk out of the machine. The father didn't adopt employees. Step back and look at the table. 5 factors, 5 fronts, and notice, not one of them is a temptation. Not one is a sin. Every single plan is aimed at your identity, and every single one runs on deception. Distort the father. Confuse the timing. Move the terrain. Counterfeit the commander. Install the system. 5 lies, 1 target, keep the son from knowing he's a son. That's why Sun Tzu put all warfare is based on deception in the planning chapter. The deception isn't a tactic the enemy reaches for in the heat of battle. It's the entire architecture of his strategy, designed at the table before you were ever tempted to do anything. So before you ever felt the pull to sin, before the first temptation was ever set in your path, a council met and a plan was laid. And the plan was never really about your behavior. He didn't start with a temptation. He started with a strategy. And the strategy was deception, because the truth would end him. Sun Tzu's second chapter is about money. Not glory, not heroism, not the clash of steel money. He opens by counting the cost of putting an army in the field. The chariots, the provisions, the wagons, the daily expenditure of 1,000 pieces of silver. And then he delivers a warning that every general after him has had to reckon with. There is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare. Read that again, because it's the hinge of the whole chapter. A long war is a losing war, not because you lose the battles, but because you lose the treasury. When you engage in actual fighting, if victory is long in coming, the men's weapons will grow dull and their ardor will be damped. The army doesn't get defeated. It gets drained. The campaign goes on so long that the cost of fighting it exceeds anything victory could pay back. Sun Tzu's conclusion is blunt. The prize is a quick victory, not a long one. In war, let your great object be victory, not lengthy campaigns. Now hold that beside your enemy, and watch the most cynical move at his table come into focus. He cannot win a fair fight. We established that in the prologue, the cross disarmed him, the verdict is in. He has no path to victory. So he does the one thing a defeated power can still do to a son who hasn't realized the war is over. He makes the campaign long. Here's what you have to understand about your enemy's situation. He is broke. After Calvary, he has no power to take from you, no ground to capture, no verdict to overturn. His treasury is empty. He cannot win by gaining anything. So he switches to the only economics a bankrupt enemy has left. He stops trying to gain and starts trying to make you spend. He can't add to his account, but he can drain yours. He can keep you in the field, weapons dull, ardor damped, treasury bleeding, for years, for a whole lifetime if he can manage it. Every day you spend striving is a day his attrition warfare is working. This is the part that should make you sit up. The exhaustion is the strategy. It isn't a side effect. It isn't friendly fire. The tiredness, the spiritual fatigue, the sense that you're always behind and never arriving, that is not evidence that you're failing at the Christian life. It's evidence that you're succeeding at his version of it. He doesn't need you to lose. He just needs you to keep paying. Sun Tzu understood that a clever enemy makes the other side bear the cost of the war. The skillful soldier does not raise a second levy. Neither are his supply wagons loaded more than twice. Bring war material with you from home, but forage on the enemy. Forage on the enemy. Let his country feed your army. Let his treasury fund your campaign. That's exactly what religion does to a son. The whole apparatus of striving runs on your fuel. Your effort, your willpower, your guilt, your endless self-monitoring. That's the silver the enemy spends to keep the war going, and it's your silver. He's foraging on you. The campaign against your identity is financed entirely by the son who doesn't know he's a son. Let me name the weapon plainly, because most believers have never seen it for what it is. Religion, by which I mean the whole system of earning, performing, qualifying, and maintaining your standing before God by effort, is not a path to God. It is attrition warfare conducted against a son. And its defining feature, the thing that makes it the enemy's perfect weapon, is this: it never ends. That's not a flaw in the system. That's the entire point. Think about how a performance-based religion is structured. There is always one more thing. Pray more. Read more. Repent harder. Serve longer. Feel more sorry. Get more disciplined. Every standard you reach reveals a higher one. Every box you check uncovers 3 more. The goalposts are mounted on wheels. You can have the best day of your spiritual life and go to bed certain you fell short, because the system is engineered so that arrival is structurally impossible. There is no finish line on the terrain of law, because a finish line is the one thing the enemy cannot allow you to cross. Paul knew this terrain from the inside. He had been its model citizen. As for righteousness based on the law, faultless, Philippians 3:6. Faultless and still on the field, still spending, still at war. The law, he discovered, could expose his condition but never end his striving. I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. What a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me? Romans 7:19-24. That cry, who will rescue me, is the sound of a soldier whose weapons have grown dull and whose ardor is spent. It is the sound of a prolonged campaign, doing exactly what prolonged campaigns do. The writer of Hebrews paints the picture with one devastating image. the old covenant priest who stands daily ministering and offering repeatedly the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. Hebrews 10:11. Stands daily, repeatedly, never finished. There is no chair in the system because the work is never done. The whole religious economy is built around a man who can never sit down. That standing, never sitting priest is the portrait of a son under attrition. And the enemy loves that portrait, because a son who is always working is a son who is always paying. Now watch what terrifies the enemy. Hebrews finishes that image with a contrast that detonates the entire attrition strategy. But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down at the right hand of God. Hebrews 10:12. One sacrifice, forever. And then he sat down. The posture the old system never permitted, the rest the long campaign was designed to make impossible. The chair that the standing priest could never reach, Jesus simply sat in it. Because the work was finished. By one sacrifice he has made perfect forever those who are being made holy. Hebrews 10:14. This is the move the enemy cannot survive. A son who grasps the finished work doesn't fight the long war harder. He ends it. In a day. In an hour. In the single moment, the truth lands, and he stops paying for a victory that was already bought. Sun Tzu said the prize is a quick victory, not a long one, and for a son, the victory isn't just quick, it's already over. You don't wage the campaign, you discover it was won before you enlisted. The rest that the enemy spent your whole life trying to keep you from is one revelation away. There remains, then, a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from his own works, just as God did from his. Hebrews 4:9-10. Rest from his own works. That is the war ending in a day. And here is why that prospect is the enemy's nightmare. Every day you strive costs you everything and costs him nothing, but the day you rest, the entire economy of his campaign collapses. He cannot forage on a son who has stopped spending. He cannot drain a treasury that has stopped paying out. A resting son is a son he can no longer afford to fight, because attrition only works on a target that keeps showing up to the long war. The moment you sit down, his whole strategy goes bankrupt. That's why every form of the lie aims at the same outcome: keep you standing, keep you working, keep the campaign long. Because a son at rest is a son who has read the playbook and walked off the field. So let me say something to the part of you that is tired. You have probably read your exhaustion as a verdict. If I were really walking with God, I wouldn't be this worn out. The tiredness must mean I'm doing it wrong, not praying enough, not disciplined enough. You've treated the fatigue as proof of your failure and used it to recruit yourself into more striving, which is, of course, exactly the move the attrition strategy depends on. The exhaustion sends you back to the front to spend more, but run it through the analyst's lens instead. What if the exhaustion isn't a sign of weakness? What if it's a tell, the visible evidence that you've been fighting on the wrong economy? You are tired because you've been funding a finished war. You've been spending treasury on a victory that was already paid for in someone else's blood. The fatigue isn't your failure. It's the price tag of a campaign you were never meant to be financing. Sun Tzu would recognize it instantly. Weapons grown dull, ardor damped, the unmistakable cost of a war that has gone on far too long. And the same Sun Tzu would tell you the cure isn't to fight harder. It's to end the campaign. Jesus said it in the gentlest counterintelligence briefing ever given. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Matthew 11:28-30. Notice who he's addressing. Not the lazy, the weary. Not the ones avoiding the work, the ones crushed under it. The exhausted son is exactly the one the offer is for, and the offer is not a better strategy for the long war. It's the end of it. I will give you rest. The enemy's entire second chapter doctrine is to keep that rest one more obligation away. Always almost. Never sit down. Keep the war long, because a long war drains a son and costs a bankrupt devil nothing. But you've seen the books now. You've seen the empty treasury on his side and the finished work on yours. You know the campaign was over before you ever picked up a weapon, and that the only thing keeping you in the field is a lie about how much you still owe. You owe nothing. The invoice reads paid. And the chair, the one the standing priest could never reach, has had your name on it the whole time. Striving is expensive for you and free for him. That's why he loves it. Read that line again and feel the cold genius of it. The master strategist does not measure himself by battles won. He measures himself by battles never fought. A general who has to draw his sword has already failed somewhere upstream. The supreme commander wins in the planning room before a single soldier laces his boots. He bends the outcome so far in his favor that the enemy lays down his arms believing the fight is already lost. Now hold that thought against the cross, because here is the thing nobody told you when you were taught to fight the good fight with gritted teeth and white knuckles. The war you are in was not designed to be won by you firing shots. It was designed by your enemy to be won by him, without firing a single shot of his own. He has no shots left. Calvary disarmed him. Having spoiled principalities and powers, he made a show of them openly, triumphing over them in it. Colossians 2:15. The Greek there is a victory parade. Christ stripped the enemy naked and marched him through the streets. That is not a description of an ongoing war. That is a description of a finished one. So what is the devil doing now? He is running the only play left to a defeated general. He is trying to break your resistance without fighting. He is trying to get you to surrender a war that is already over, to lay down arms you never needed to pick up, to forfeit ground you already own, to sign a treaty of defeat for a battle the cross already settled. Supreme excellence, the satanic version. Subdue the sun without ever beating the sun. Make him surrender his identity voluntarily. This is the linchpin chapter. So let me state the whole conspiracy in one sentence and then spend the next 2,000 words proving it. He cannot defeat a son who knows he is a son, so his entire strategy is to keep the son from finding out. That is it. That is the war. Everything else, the temptation, the religion, the condemnation, the striving, the shame, is downstream of that one objective. He does not need to beat you. He needs you to forget who you are. A king who forgets he is a king will live like a beggar in his own palace, and he will do it voluntarily, and the usurper will never have to lift a finger. That is winning without firing a shot. Think about how strange this is. In every other war, the loser is the one conquered. Here, the loser is already conquered, and he is trying to get the winner to act like the loser. Satan's problem after the resurrection is not strength. It is publicity. The verdict came in. He lost. Jesus said it plainly, "Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out." John 12:31. Cast out, not regrouping. His authority was legal, and it has been revoked. The only thing he has left is whether you know the verdict came in. So he does not attack your behavior first. He attacks your information. A defeated enemy, who cannot win on the battlefield, will always move the war to the realm of perception. He cannot change what is true about you, so he works tirelessly to change what you believe about you. And he is patient. He does not need a dramatic fall. He just needs a slow, quiet daily erosion of the one fact that makes you dangerous, that you are a son of God, born of God, seated with Christ, accepted in the beloved, and heir. Watch how Paul says it. Ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but ye have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. Romans 8:15-16. Notice, the Spirit's first and chief assignment in your life is not to make you behave. It is to testify to your identity. The Spirit itself beareth witness. If the Spirit's headline ministry is convincing you that you are a son, then you can be sure the enemy's headline ministry is convincing you that you are not. The whole battle is over a birth certificate. Sun Tzu gives the formula for 100 safe battles. Know the enemy and know yourself. Most people read the second half as a self-help slogan. Find yourself, be authentic, discover your passion. Scrub that off. In the context of war, know yourself is not therapy. It is intelligence. It is knowing the actual fighting truth of your own position, your strength, your standing, your supply lines, your reserves. A general who misjudges his own army loses by his own bad math before the enemy ever shows up. For the sun, know yourself has a precise content, and it is the most strategic intelligence in the universe. Know your sonship. Know that you were predestinated unto the adoption of children by Jesus Christ to himself. Ephesians 1:5. Know that you are no more a servant but a son, and if a son, then an heir of God through Christ. Galatians 4:7. Know that now are we the sons of God. 1 John 3:2. Now, present tense, not pending, not probationary. This is your order of battle. This is the truth about your own forces. And the enemy's supreme strategy is to corrupt your intelligence on this one point. And know the enemy. Here is the freeing part. When you finally know yourself rightly, you discover that the enemy is far weaker than the rumors. You were told he was a roaring lion. He is. But read the verse, as a roaring lion, 1 Peter 5:8, as. It is an impersonation. A roar is a sound, not a weapon. He roars precisely because he can no longer bite. The roar is part of the psyop. It is meant to make a son who could walk straight through him, instead freeze, surrender, and never test whether the cage door is actually locked. To know the enemy is to know he is bluffing. To know yourself is to know you are a son. Hold both, and Son Tzu's promise lands with full weight. You need not fear the result of 100 battles, not because you are strong enough to win them, but because the war they represent was already won, and the only thing left is whether you believe it. Every counterintelligence operation runs on forged documents. Plan a fake, get the target to act on it, and you never have to fight him. He defeats himself trusting bad paper. The enemy's forgeries share one signature. They all read, "You are not really a son." He just rotates the letterhead. To the one who has sinned, the forgery reads, "A real son wouldn't have done that, so you must not be one." And the son, believing the document, slinks away from the father exactly when the father is running down the road to meet him. Luke 15:20. The prodigal's rehearsed speech, "Make me as one of thy hired servants," is a son trying to downgrade his identity to match his behavior. The father interrupts it. He will not let the boy renegotiate sonship over a sin. Robe, ring, shoes, feast. The father overrides the forgery with evidence. To the one trying hard, the forgery reads, "You are a son to the degree that you perform." This is the subtle one, the one most sons get stuck on for years, the mixture. Law blended into grace until you can't tell which engine pulls the train. You still call God Father, but you live like a contractor, invoicing your obedience and waiting to see if it covers the rent. That is religion wearing a son's clothes. And it is exactly what the enemy wants, because a son who thinks his standing is performance-based can always be destabilized by a bad week. Mixture keeps the war alive. Pure sonship ends it. To the one who is condemned, the forgery is loudest, and Paul demolishes it in one verse. "There is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus." Romans 8:1. No condemnation. Now, none. The court is not in session. The forger keeps mailing summonses to a trial dismissed 2,000 years ago. And as long as you keep showing up to defend yourself, you keep losing a case that has no judge, no jury, and no charges left on the docket. Here is why this chapter is the hinge of the whole book. The entire conspiracy is load-bearing on a single beam, your ignorance of your identity. Pull that beam, and the whole structure comes down at once. Not slowly, not after a campaign. At once. The instant a son knows, really knows, revelation knows, not merely agrees with it doctrinally knows, that he is a son. Every tactic in the enemy's arsenal goes dead in his hand, simultaneously. Condemnation has nothing to condemn, because the verdict is already accepted in the beloved. Temptation loses its leverage, because it could only ever offer to make you something you already are. Striving stops, because you don't climb to a position you were born into. Fear of the roar fades, because you've read the rest of the verse. Mixture dissolves, because pure grace has no room for invoices. This is why the enemy fights so hard to keep one fact in the dark. It is not that he has many strong weapons, and you must survive them all. It is that he has one weapon, deception, and it only works in the dark, and your knowing is the light. "And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." John 8:32. Not the truth shall fight for you. Not the truth shall eventually free you if you fight well enough. The truth known makes you free. The way a man learning he was acquitted hours ago simply walks out of a cell whose door was never actually locked. So the war is not effort against the enemy. The war is light against the dark. Revelation against the forgery. Your job is not to manufacture a victory. Your job is to check the documents, to go back to the Father's filing cabinet, pull your own papers, and read what is written there in the blood of his Son. The enemy has bet his entire post-Calvary campaign on you never doing that. Sun Tzu taught that the most dangerous soldier has nothing left to lose. The army on death ground, backs to the river, no retreat, who fights with a freedom no fresh troops can match. The Son stands on a stronger version of that ground. You are not a man who might die. You are a man who already did. For ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. Colossians 3:3. And not only dead, already risen, already seated. That is why every threat the enemy makes is hollow. What do you do to a man already dead and already raised? You cannot kill him, that card is spent. You cannot ruin him, his life is hidden where you cannot reach it. The only thing left is to deceive him, to keep him from knowing he has already passed through death into a life now untouchable. The whole bluff depends on the sun, not knowing he stands on the far side of the grave. This is the supreme strategy run in reverse. The enemy needs a risen sun to live like a man still afraid of dying, cautious, defensive, begging for life he already owns. He does not need to defeat you. He needs you ignorant of your own resurrection. The moment you know it, you become the soldier on death ground with nothing to lose and everything already won. Fearless because the worst has already happened and you are still standing. So check the documents. Pull your papers from the Father's cabinet. Read the verdict, the adoption, the place where it says you already died and already rose. The conspiracy cannot survive a son who has read his own file. He never beat you. He just hoped you'd never check your own birth certificate. Sun Tzu, in his 4th chapter, hands us the most counterintuitive principle in all of warfare. The good fighter does not begin by attacking. He begins by becoming unattackable. He first makes himself invincible, sets his position beyond the reach of defeat, and only then turns his attention to the enemy. Defense before offense, position before action. He does not go looking for a fight he might lose. He establishes a ground that cannot be taken, and from there, he is patient. There is a quiet thunder in that word invincible. Most of us have spent our spiritual lives trying to become strong. Sun Tzu says the master does not become strong against attack, he becomes immune to it. He occupies a position so secure that the enemy's strength is simply irrelevant. The battle is decided not by what the attacker does, but by where the defender stands. Now I want to tell you where you stand. Because the gospel does not ask you to build an invincible position. It announces that one was built for you, that you have already been placed inside it, and that you woke up this morning standing on ground you did not climb to and cannot fall from. But God, who is rich in mercy, for his great love wherewith he loved us, even when we were dead in sins, hath quickened us together with Christ, and hath raised us up together, and made us sit together in heavenly places in Christ Jesus. Ephesians 2:4-6. Read the verbs and notice that every one of them is something done to you. Quickened, raised, made to sit. You are not the actor in a single one of them. You were dead, and dead men do not climb to high ground. They are carried there. The position you occupy in Christ was achieved by Christ and granted to you while you were a corpse incapable of contributing 1 ounce of effort to your own resurrection. That is the entire point. A position you did not climb to is a position you cannot fall from. Of all the words the New Testament uses for your standing, the most strategic is seated. Made us sit together in heavenly places in Christ Jesus. You are not crawling toward the throne. You are not pacing the floor before it, waiting to hear your case. You are seated. And seated is the posture of finished work, of settled rank, of a battle that someone else already won on your behalf. When Jesus had by himself purged our sins, sat down on the right hand of the Majesty on high, Hebrews 1:3, he sat because there was nothing left to do. The priests of the old order never sat. There were no chairs in the tabernacle because the work was never finished. But the Son sat down, and you are seated with him. Here is the strategic genius of it. You cannot be dislodged from a position you are seated in by someone else. Sun Tzu says the good fighter puts himself beyond the possibility of defeat and then waits. You have been put beyond it. So now you wait, not in anxiety, but in the rest of one who knows the high ground was secured before he ever drew breath. And here is where the Sun's position outclasses even Sun Tzu's. The old general says, to secure ourselves against defeat lies in our own hands. That is the best a man can do, make his security depend on himself. But a security that lies in your own hands is only as strong as your hands, and your hands tremble. Your hands get tired. Your grip fails on the bad days. The Sun's security lies in better hands. My Father, which gave them me, is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand. John 10:29. Your position is held not by your grip on Christ, but by his grip on you. This is stronger than Sun Tzu's principle, not weaker. Because the one thing more secure than security in your own hands is security in hands that do not tremble, do not tire, and have never once lost their grip on anything the Father gave them. You did not seize this position. You were placed in it. And the one who placed you there is the one holding you there. Then Colossians adds a word that completes the fortress. Not just seated, hidden. For ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. Colossians 3:3. Stop on that. Your life is hidden. There is a double wall around it, hidden with Christ and that in God. To get to you, the enemy would have to get through Christ, and then through God. Those are not walls he is breaching. The verse is a description of a vault, and you are the thing locked safely inside it. The roaring you hear is the sound of an enemy on the outside of a door he cannot open, trying to convince the one inside that the vault is actually a cage, and he had better come out and surrender. This is why the enemy's whole campaign, again, is informational. He cannot touch your position, so he works to convince you that you are somewhere else. He cannot dislodge a seated sun, so he whispers that you were never really seated. That your standing depends on today's performance, that one bad week could unseat you. That you are only as secure as your last good day. Every one of those whispers is an attempt to get you to leave a position you cannot be removed from. He cannot evict you. He can only try to talk you into walking out. Here is the line the whole chapter turns on. Sonship is a position, not an achievement. An achievement is something you climb to, and therefore something you can slide back down from. A position is somewhere you are placed, and your placement does not depend on your performance. Religion has spent centuries selling sonship as an achievement, a thing you ascend toward by obedience, by discipline, by the slow accumulation of spiritual merit. And the cruelty of that lie is that it puts your standing back in your own trembling hands, which is exactly where the enemy wants it, because hands that earned a position can lose it, and a son who thinks he climbed up can be made to fear the fall. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born of God. John 1:12-13. Born of God. You do not achieve a birth. You receive one. No infant earns its way into a family by good conduct in the delivery room. It is born, and its name goes on the registry, and that is a settled fact before it has done a single thing right or wrong. So when the accusation comes, and it will come, dressed as honesty, dressed as humility, dressed as conviction, that you have not done enough to deserve your place, you can answer it the way a son answers, and a hireling cannot. I never deserved my place. It was never on offer for the deserving. I was born into it, seated in it, hidden in it, and held in it by hands stronger than my own. Now we arrive at the truth that reorders your whole spiritual life. You are on defense, and what you defend is finished. Sun Tzu puts defense first for a reason. You secure yourself against defeat before you ever think about conquest. The sun's spiritual life runs on the same order, but with a twist that changes everything. The sun does not defend a position he is trying to win. He defends a position that has already been won. He is not fighting for victory, he is standing in it. He does not strive toward acceptance. He guards the truth that he is accepted in the beloved, Ephesians 1:6. He does not labor for righteousness. He stands in the righteousness that was credited to him as a gift, Romans 5:17, where they receive abundance of grace and of the gift of righteousness. Do you feel the weight come off? Striving says, I must win this ground today. Sonship says, this ground was won on a hill outside Jerusalem, and I am simply refusing to abandon it. The enemy would love for you to believe you are an attacker, assaulting a fortress of holiness you have not yet captured, exhausting yourself against walls, taking casualties, gaining inches. You are not. You are a defender inside a fortress that was captured for you and handed to you with the gates already shut. Your warfare is not the desperate offense of a soldier trying to win. It is the settled defense of a son refusing to be talked out of what he already owns. It is finished, he said, John 19:30. Tetelestai, a word stamped on paid invoices in the ancient world. Paid in full, nothing owing. You defend a finished work. You do not earn a future one. The debt is settled, the position is secured, the high ground is taken, and you were seated on it while you slept. There is one tactic left that can still reach a seated sun, and it is the most refined weapon in the empty armory. Mixture. Not law instead of grace, that is too crude, and most sons would spot it. Mixture is law stirred into grace until the two are indistinguishable, until you cannot tell which engine holds your position. You confess that Christ seated you, and in the same breath you live as though staying seated is your job. You agree the work is finished, then audit yourself nightly to make sure you have kept up your end of a transaction that had no second party. This is how the enemy gets a man off the high ground without ever forcing him. He does not have to evict the son from the position of grace. He only has to convince him that grace got him in and effort keeps him there. And the instant the son believes it, He has voluntarily, quietly, with no shot fired, climbed down off an invincible position onto a contestable one. Christ is become of no effect unto you, whosoever of you are justified by the law, ye are fallen from grace. Galatians 5:4. Fallen not from salvation, but from the posture of grace into the posture of effort, where his standing is suddenly only as strong as his last good day. Sun Tzu warned that a single misjudged position forfeits the whole campaign. Mixture is that misjudgment. It moves you an inch off the seated, hidden, held ground, and an inch is all the enemy needs, because on the ground of effort he can finally make a sun afraid. So the sun's defensive discipline is simple and relentless. Refuse the mixture. Keep your standing entirely in his hands, and never let 1 ounce of it slide back into your own. The position is invincible only as long as it remains his. So let the enemy roar at the vault door. Let him mail his summonses to a closed court. Let him try with all his deceptive craft to convince a seated, hidden, held sun that his standing is up for grabs today. It is not. The good fighter first makes himself beyond defeat and then waits. You have been made beyond defeat, not by your effort but by his. Now you wait, seated, secure, and unbothered, in a position that was never yours to win and is therefore never yours to lose. You're not trying to win the high ground. You were seated on it before you woke up. Sun Tzu spends this chapter on a single word: energy. Not strength, energy. There is a difference, and it is the difference between a man pushing a boulder uphill and a river that carries the boulder downhill without trying. Both move the boulder. One is exhausted by noon. The other has not yet broken a sweat because it is not lifting anything. It is flowing, and the flow does the lifting. He gives us his 2 great categories, the direct and the indirect. The direct is the obvious force, the frontal push, the head-on shove, the meeting of strength against strength. The indirect is everything else. Timing, position, angle, momentum, the unexpected flow that arrives from a direction no one was defending. And then he tells you which one wins. He praises the round stone rolling down the 1,000-foot mountain. He praises the torrent that tumbles boulders it could never have lifted. The decisive energy in war, he insists, is not the energy you manufacture by straining. It is the energy of momentum, force borrowed from gravity, from height, from the nature of the slope itself. That is the whole kingdom in a metaphor, and the enemy has been hiding it from you your entire Christian life. The Son of God has 2 possible engines, and they correspond exactly to Sun Tzu's 2 methods. The direct engine is willpower. It is the flesh. It is you, gritting your teeth, pushing against the rock with everything you have, trying to generate spiritual life by force of effort. It is the frontal assault of religious striving. Pray harder, try harder, repent harder, white-knuckle your way into holiness. It is loud, it is exhausting, and it is precisely the kind of warfare Sun Tzu held in contempt. The direct method, used alone, is the mark of the amateur. The indirect engine is rest. It is the Spirit's flow. It is the momentum of grace carrying a son who has stopped pushing and started being carried. It is sonship operating the way sonship was designed to operate, not by manufacturing energy, but by yielding to an energy already in motion. It is the rounded stone that does not have to try to roll, because it is on the slope, and the slope does the rest. Here is the thing the enemy desperately needs you not to understand. The kingdom of God runs almost entirely on the indirect. Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. Zechariah 4:6. Not by might, not by your force. Not by power, not by your strength. By the Spirit, by the flow you did not generate and cannot exhaust. The whole economy of grace is indirect. It moves boulders you could never lift, precisely because you are not the one lifting them. So the enemy's strategy, predictably, is to keep you fighting direct. He wants you red-faced and shoving against the rock, because as long as you believe spiritual progress is something you produce by effort, you will stay locked in the one mode of warfare that guarantees exhaustion and never moves the boulder an inch. Every try-harder sermon, every guilt-driven resolution, every striving for an acceptance you already have, these keep you on the direct method, grinding, while the indirect momentum of grace sits unused beside you, like a river you refuse to step into. Watch how cleanly Scripture maps onto this. Paul looks at the Galatians, sons who have started fighting direct, and he is incredulous. Are ye so foolish? Having begun in the Spirit, are ye now made perfect by the flesh? Galatians 3:3. There it is. Begun in the Spirit, that is the indirect, the flow, the momentum of grace that started everything. Made perfect by the flesh, that is the switch to the direct, the return to pushing the rock. And Paul calls it foolishness, because it is a downgrade from the river to the shovel, from the slope to the deadlift. The flesh, the direct method, has a fatal limitation. It can only produce flesh. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. John 3:6. You cannot grind your way into spiritual fruit. You cannot manufacture by effort the kind of life that only flows by grace. The harder you push, the more flesh you produce, and flesh was the problem in the first place. It is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline, because gasoline is also a liquid. Wrong substance, wrong engine. And consider the fruit itself. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Galatians 5:22-23. Fruit, not product, not output. Fruit does not strain. A branch does not grunt and sweat to produce a grape. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can ye except ye abide in me. For without me ye can do nothing. John 15:4-5. Abide, remain, rest, stay connected to the flow. The fruit is the result of the connection, not the reward for the effort. This is the indirect method in its purest form. The branch does nothing direct. It simply stays on the vine, and the life of the vine flows through it, and the fruit appears as though by gravity, because that is the nature of the slope. Now feel the relief of sun, Tizu's image, when you read it as a sun. The momentum of good fighting men is as the momentum of a round stone rolled down a mountain thousands of feet in height. The torrent rolls boulders. The decisive energy is borrowed energy, taken from the height, from the slope, from the current. The warrior does not supply the force. He positions himself in the force. This is the secret the enemy guards with everything he has, because it ends his entire campaign of exhaustion. You were not built to generate the energy. You were built to flow with it. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Matthew 11:28-30. The man who said this moved more than any human in history, and he described his way of moving as rest. Easy yoke, light burden. That is not the language of a man pushing a rock uphill. That is the language of a man on the slope, in the current, carried by a momentum he did not have to manufacture. The cross is what put you on the slope. You died with Christ, the old striving self, the man who had to push, was crucified, and you rose with Christ into a life that is no longer yours to power. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. Galatians 2:20. Not I. That is the death of the direct method. The energy is no longer self-generated. It is Christ's life flowing through a son who has stopped trying to be his own engine. The boulder still moves. It moves more. But you are no longer the one heaving it. The torrent is, and you are riding the torrent. It seems backward, which is exactly why it works as a hiding place. The enemy would love for you to believe that rest is laziness and striving is devotion. That the son who stops pushing has given up, while the son grinding himself to dust is the faithful one. He has it perfectly inverted. The striving son is stuck. He is in the one mode that cannot move the boulder, burning himself out against a rock that grace was always going to roll for him. The resting son is dangerous because he has stepped into a momentum the enemy cannot stop. The flow of the Spirit, the slope of grace, the unstoppable current of sonship. A son who has stopped manufacturing and started flowing is a son the conspiracy can no longer exhaust. And exhaustion was one of the last tools in the empty armory. So the enemy keeps shouting, push harder. Because the moment you stop pushing and let the slope take you, the boulders start moving, and there is nothing he can do about it. There is a reason this is the chapter on energy, and not the chapter on effort. Sun Tzu never once praises the soldier who simply works hardest. He praises the commander who arranges his forces so that the momentum does the work, who fights with the slope, not against it. The amateur asks, how do I push harder? The master asks, how do I get the whole weight of the mountain on my side? And for the son, the entire weight of the mountain is already on his side. The slope of grace runs in his favor. The current of the Spirit runs toward his freedom. The only question left is whether he will keep heaving against a rock that the torrent was always going to carry. This is why the indirect always defeats the direct in the kingdom. The direct method pits your finite strength against an infinite assignment and guarantees collapse. The indirect method puts an infinite life behind a finite vessel and guarantees fruit. He which hath begun a good work in you will perform it. Philippians 1:6. He will perform it, not you grinding it out, but a momentum already in motion that finishes what it started. Your part is not to generate the work. Your part is to stay on the stone and let it roll. And notice how the deception in this chapter is the same deception that runs the whole book, just wearing work clothes. The enemy's one weapon is to obscure your identity. And a striving son has, without realizing it, accepted a lie about who he is. He has accepted that he is an engine, a source, a generator, the one responsible for producing his own spiritual life. But a son is not a source. A son is a recipient and a conduit. The life flows from the Father, through the Son, into the Son, and out, and the moment you forget that and try to become the source, you have left your identity and picked up a burden God never assigned you. The grinding is not just inefficient. It is a symptom of forgotten sonship. You were built for flow. The grinding was never the assignment. The straining was never the strength. The momentum of grace was always there. The slope always tilted in your favor, the current always running toward the sea, and the only thing standing between you and the boulders rolling was your refusal to stop heaving and simply get on. Stop pushing the rock. Get on it. A good commander does not throw his army at a fortress. He walks the wall in the dark, runs his hand along the stone, and feels for the seam where the mortar has crumbled. He attacks not where you are strong, but where you are soft. He appears where you forgot to post a guard. This is the most important thing to understand about the war against you. The enemy has already surveyed your wall. He knows exactly where it holds and exactly where it gives. And he has made a decision that should chill you and free you at the same time. He has decided never to attack your strong point. Your strong point is the finished work of the cross. It is the blood that was spilled, the price that was paid, the verdict that was rendered, the tomb that came up empty. That wall is granite. It does not crack. The enemy is not stupid. He has no intention of laying siege to a thing that cannot be moved. He will not argue with you about whether Jesus died. He will not contest the resurrection. He will not stand at the foot of Calvary and try to talk the nails out of the wood. So if he will not attack the cross, where does he go? He goes after the soft tissue. He goes after the one place where the finished work has to be received, the place where stone becomes flesh, where the verdict becomes your verdict, where the son's sonship becomes your sonship. He goes after your sense of who you are. He attacks identity. Always. Only. Picture the line where the wall meets the gate. The wall is the objective truth of redemption, fixed, external, accomplished without your help. The gate is the place that truth enters you and becomes yours. The wall cannot be breached. But the gate has a hinge, and the hinge is a question. Do you believe this is about you? That hinge is the seam. That is the unguarded point. That is where the formless enemy pours in like water finding the low ground. He does not need to disprove your salvation. He only needs to make you uncertain it belongs to you. He does not need to undo the adoption. He only needs to keep you from feeling adopted. A son who is legally an heir but emotionally, an orphan will live like an orphan, and an orphan is no threat to a kingdom of darkness. He will strive. He will hide. He will perform. He will do everything except rest in what is already his. The strong point is untouchable, so the enemy gives it a wide berth and marches straight for the seam, your identity, where the granite turns to skin. We have a transcript. The enemy made the mistake, once, of attacking the only son who could not be deceived, and in failing he showed us his entire playbook. Read the temptation in the wilderness, Matthew 4, Luke 4, and listen not to the offers but to the grammar. The first words out of the tempter's mouth are these: "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become bread." Stop on the first word. If. He did not say, "You are not the Son of God." He could not say that. It was not true, and a lie that obvious would have shattered on contact. He said if. He put a hinge on the sentence. He took the most settled fact in the universe, a fact God himself had thundered from heaven only days before. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And he reattached it to performance. If you are, then prove it. Make the bread. Throw yourself down. Force the angel's hands. Watch the move. The enemy does not deny the sonship. He questions it, and then he attaches it to a demonstration. If you really are, you'll do something. You'll feel something. You'll produce something. Sonship by audition. Identity on a proving ground. And notice the timing. The Father said, "This is my beloved Son at the Jordan." The voice of approval came before a single miracle, before the Sermon on the Mount, before one demon was cast out, before the first man was healed. The sonship was declared on the front end, freely, with nothing to point to but a man coming up out of the water. Then the Spirit drove him into the wilderness, and the very first thing the enemy did was try to move that declaration from the front end to the back end. Earn what your Father already gave you. That is the strike zone. That is the seam. Every assault in that wilderness aimed at the same square inch of wall. Not did the Father speak, but was he telling the truth about who you are, and can you keep it without proving it? We give the enemy too much credit. We imagine a master strategist with 1,000 original schemes, a different trap for every personality, a fresh deception for every age. We picture genius. He is not a genius. He is a man with one tool. Across every assault, in every life, in every century, the question is the same. If you are a son, if you were really forgiven, if God actually loved you, would this have happened? If you belong to him, would you struggle like this? The costume changes. The accent changes. The square inch never changes. He is attacking the seam, and there is only one seam, so there is only one attack. This is unspeakably good news. It means the war has a single front. You do not have to be ready for everything. You have to be ready for one thing, dressed up as everything. The man who knows the enemy only has one play, is a man who can finally stop scrambling. He stops trying to guard the whole perimeter of his behavior and plants himself in front of the one gate that matters. Most believers exhaust themselves defending the wrong wall. They fortify their conduct. They reinforce their discipline. They stack sandbags against particular sins, and the enemy lets them. Because while they are busy bricking up the windows, he is walking through the seam they never noticed. They think the war is about behavior. The war was never about behavior. Behavior is the smoke. Identity is the fire. Pull any temptation apart, and you will find the same machinery underneath. The pull toward the old sin is not finally about the pleasure. It is a whisper that says, this is what you really are. The new name was a costume. Underneath, you're still him. The accusation after you fall is not finally about the act. It is a verdict that says, a real son wouldn't have. This proves it. The dead religious striving, the rededications, the bargains, the frantic spiritual effort, is not finally about pleasing God. It is the labor of a man who is not sure he's a son and is trying to become one by force. Even your despair is an identity claim. To despair is to conclude that the Father's word over you is provisional, that the beloved Son can be revoked by your performance, that the verdict at the Jordan only holds on your good days. Turn each one over, and you find the enemy's fingerprints on the same spot. If you are the Son of God, this is the lens that changes the war. Once you see that every attack, the temptation, the accusation, the dead religion, the striving, the despair, is the same question wearing a new costume, you stop fighting symptoms and start defending the one wall worth defending. You stop arguing with the smoke and address the fire. He did not defend himself by performing. That is the thing to see. The enemy said, if you are, prove it, and Jesus refused to take the audition. He did not make the bread to settle the question. He did not jump from the temple to verify the angels. To accept the dare would have been to agree that the sonship was unsettled, that it needed a demonstration to be real. Instead, he stood on the declaration. It is written. He met the if with the already said. He treated the Father's word over him as the fixed point, and the enemy's question as the thing that had to bend. That is the whole defense of the seam, and it is yours. You do not answer the if by producing evidence. You answer it by refusing the frame. The sonship is not up for proof. It was settled at a cross you did not build, declared over you in blood you did not spill, sealed by a spirit you did not summon. The enemy wants the burden of proof. You do not hand it to him. You hand him the word that was spoken first. You are not defending a future you have to earn. You are defending a finished work you have already been given. That distinction is the difference between a soldier guarding a fortress that stands and a beggar trying to build one out of his own sweat while the walls are already up around him. Sun Tzu promised the subtle commander he could become the director of the opponent's fate, invisible, inaudible, dictating the terms of the fight. And for a while, against orphan-hearted men, the enemy was exactly that. Formless, unexpected, pouring through the one seam we never thought to watch, because we were all watching our behavior. But a directed fate depends on the target never seeing the seam. The whole strategy collapses the instant you learn where he strikes. The water that finds the low ground is helpless once you know which ground is low. The general who appears where you are not expected has no advantage the moment you know exactly where to expect him. And now you know. He will not come at the cross. He will come at you. He will not deny the Son. He will question whether you are one. He will not invent, he will repeat. He will dress the one question in 10,000 costumes and march it, again and again, against the same square inch of wall. The seam where granite becomes flesh, where the finished work becomes your finished work, where beloved Son either holds or buckles. So stop reinforcing the wall he was never going to attack. Stop sandbagging your conduct while the gate stands open. Plant yourself at the seam. Stand on the word that was spoken first. And when the costume changes, and it will endlessly, brilliantly, exhaustingly, strip it off and look underneath, and you will find the same tired sentence you have heard 1,000 times. It was never, did you sin? It was always, are you really a son? Same question. New costume. There is a road that runs from where you are to where God is. It is wide. It is well lit. It is crowded with sincere travelers, and it is marked every 100 yards with reassuring signs. Pray more. Try harder. Clean yourself up. Get serious. The travelers on this road are not lazy. They are some of the most disciplined people you will ever meet. They fast. They study. They serve until they are hollow. They wake before dawn to wrestle with God for a closeness they are sure is just over the next hill. And the road never arrives. That is its design. It was engineered by a master of maneuver to look like the way home, while functioning as the longest possible detour around it. This is the 7th chapter of the war, and it is the most cunning, because here the enemy stops attacking you and starts directing you. He has learned he cannot keep a son from God by force. So instead he points him down a road, a beautiful, devout, exhausting road, and lets the road do the work. Sun Tzu calls it the hardest thing in all of warfare, turning the circuitous into the direct, the devious into the straight. The general who masters maneuver does not need to defeat you in open battle. He simply moves you. He entices you out of position. He sets the terrain so that your own marching carries you away from the prize, and you never feel the deception, because every step feels like progress. This is precisely the enemy's masterwork against the church. He does not, in most lives, fight grace with open atheism. That is a clumsy weapon, and it fails too often. The heart was made for God and tends to drift back toward him. So the enemy does something far more elegant. He does not block the road to God. He replaces it with a counterfeit road that runs alongside it, parallel, close enough to fool the eye, and he names the counterfeit religion. The genius of the religious road is that it is not pointed away from God. It is pointed at him. Everyone on it is facing the right direction. They are seeking the right person. Their longing is genuine, and their effort is real. This is what makes the deviation so total. The road has all the signage of the destination and none of the arrival. It is built, every plank of it, from performance and law. And performance and law can carry you in a circle for 50 years without ever setting you down at the Father's feet. You can spend an entire Christian life on the devious road that looks direct, striving toward an acceptance you already have, marching toward a Father who is already running toward you, walking home to a home you never left. Here is why so few escape it. The religious road feels holy. That is its camouflage. Sin feels like sin. The conscience flags it, the spirit grieves, some alarm goes off. But the religious detour does not trip a single alarm, because everything on it looks like devotion. The man grinding himself to dust trying to earn what was freely given does not feel like a man being deceived. He feels like a man being faithful. He has scripture to quote. He has fruit to point to. He has the admiration of other travelers who mistake his exhaustion for zeal. And the whole time, he is being maneuvered. Watch the mechanism. The religious road takes the finished work of the cross and quietly reframes it as a starting line instead of a finish line. Jesus got you in, it whispers, now you keep yourself worthy. It takes a son and puts him to work like a servant trying to make payroll. It blends, and this is the deadly word, it blends the grace that saved you with the law that can only condemn you until you cannot tell which one you're standing on. This is the mixture the whole book keeps warning about. A little law stirred into grace does not strengthen the grace. It poisons it. Paul does not mince this in Galatians. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. He looks at people who began in the Spirit and are now striving to be perfected by the flesh, and he calls it what it is, bewitched. Maneuvered. Moved off the straight road onto the long one, by an enemy expert in the artifice of deviation. And the long road has a name in Galatians too. You who would be justified by the law have fallen from grace. Not fallen into scandal, fallen from grace. Marched yourself, sincerely, devoutly, right out of the very thing you were trying to reach. The most religious path and the wrong path are running together, side by side, and from inside the march you cannot tell them apart. You can only tell by the destination. One arrives at rest, the other never arrives at all. So how does a son catch the deception while he is still on the road? Sun Tzu warns that maneuver is dangerous precisely because the army in motion cannot always see where it is being led. He tells his commanders to read the signs of the ground, to learn the terrain before they commit, because an army that marches blind into unfamiliar country is an army a clever enemy can herd like cattle. The sun's terrain reading comes down to a single diagnostic question, and you can run it on any spiritual practice, any teaching, any inner voice that calls itself devout. Ask, does this road run on what Christ finished, or on what I am still trying to finish? That is the whole test. Grace points backward to a completed cross and says rest in it. The religious detour points forward to an unfinished worthiness and says march toward it. One says it is done, the other says do more. The signage looks identical, both quote scripture, both speak of God, both feel like seriousness, but their direction of travel is opposite. Here is a second sign to read off the ground. Where does your sense of nearness to God come from? On the true road, your nearness is a fact of the finished work. You are in Christ, so your standing does not flicker with your performance. On the detour, your nearness rises and falls with your week. A good devotional run and you feel close. A failure and the distance yawns open again. That oscillation is the tell. A sun standing does not oscillate. If your felt position with God swings up on your good days and down on your bad ones, you have been maneuvered onto the road that measures sonship by performance. And the swinging itself is the alarm. But Sun Tzu's chapter has a second half, and so does the war. Because maneuver cuts both ways. The verse does not only describe the artifice of deviation, it describes turning misfortune into gain. And here the enemy meets a strategist infinitely above him, because God is the master of taking the very road the enemy built and walking the sun home on it. Consider what God does with the attack itself. The enemy maneuvers a son into hardship to prove he is not loved, and God uses the identical hardship to reveal that he is. The accusation meant to expose the son as a fraud becomes the very ground where his sonship is demonstrated, because a son who is still standing after the fire was never standing on his own strength. Romans says it without flinching. All things work together for good to those who love God. Not most things, not the pleasant things. All things, including the enemy's own maneuvers, including the detour, including the attack, bent by a higher hand into the service of revelation. This is the artifice of deviation turned against its inventor. The devil sets an ambush. God sets the sun in the middle of it and lets the ambush become the classroom where he finally learns who he is. The wilderness was supposed to break the Son of God. Instead, it became the stage on which he answered every if with it is written and walked out in the power of the Spirit. The enemy's terrain became the sun's vindication. Misfortune turned to gain. The devious turned direct. Hebrews says he learned obedience through what he suffered, and that the suffering perfected the very thing the enemy meant to destroy. That is the counter-maneuver. You cannot lay a trap for a son of God without God repurposing your trap into a revelation. Every attack on his identity becomes another occasion for his identity to be proved unbreakable. So here is the secret the enemy spends every ounce of his maneuvering to keep from you. There is no road home. The whole premise of the religious detour, that there is a distance to cross, a journey to make, a worthiness to march toward, is the lie. The sun is not trying to get somewhere. He is already there. Sonship was never a destination at the end of a pilgrimage of effort. It was a position, granted, finished, sealed at the cross before you took your first step. Read the wilderness again with this in mind. When the Father tore open the heavens and said, "This is my beloved Son," Jesus had not yet preached, healed, fasted, or suffered. The declaration came before the journey, not after it. The love was the starting position, not the finishing prize. And every temptation that followed was an attempt to convince him he had to travel to a status he already occupied, prove it, earn it, demonstrate it. The long road offered in the desert. He refused to take a single step down it. He did not turn the stones to bread to prove his sonship. He simply stood in it. He did not march toward what he already was. And notice the strange physics of it. Sun Tzu's chapter is obsessed with momentum. The chariot that, once rolling, is nearly impossible to stop. The religious road steals that momentum and spends it on circles. All that genuine spiritual energy, all that discipline and longing and zeal, harnessed to a wheel that turns and goes nowhere. But the sun who stops marching does not lose his momentum, he redirects it. The energy once burned to earn a love he already had gets freed for living from the love, instead of for it. The detour wastes its power in a circle, rest releases it down a straight line. The most disciplined man on the religious road and the restful sun both work hard. But only one of them is actually moving, because only one of them already knows where he stands. That is the shortest road home, and it is not a road at all. It is a standing still. It is the radical, restful refusal to journey toward a place you have never left. The enemy's entire 7th chapter campaign, all that elegant maneuvering, all those well-marked detours, all that devout, exhausting circular marching, depends on you believing there is a distance between you and the Father. There is no distance. The cross closed it. The veil is torn. The far country was the lie. The Father's house was always your address. Stop marching. Not because effort is sinful, but because the journey is fiction. You defend a finished work. You do not pilgrimage toward a future one. The most religious road in the world is just the longest possible walk to a place you are already standing. The enemy turns the direct into the devious. God turns the devious right back into the direct. And the son who sees it stops walking, sits down beside his seated king, and discovers he was home the entire time. Hook, the most religious path and the wrong path are often the same path. The enemy is a master of disguise with exactly one face. This is the paradox you have to hold to survive his 8th chapter campaign. He varies his tactics without limit. He has 1,000 costumes, 1,000 voices, 1,000 entry points, and yet behind every mask is the same unchanging objective. He is endlessly creative about method and absolutely rigid about aim. Sun Tzu praised the general who understands variation. The enemy understands it better than any general who ever lived. But variation is not improvisation toward different goals. It is 1,000 roads to one place. And the one place is always this: make the sun forget he is a sun. Once you see that, the whole bewildering parade simplifies. You stop trying to memorize 1,000 defenses against 1,000 attacks. You learn to look underneath the costume for the one face that is always there. Let me show you the wardrobe. Legalism comes dressed as reverence. It hands you a list and tells you your standing with God rises and falls with your performance on it. It feels holy. It is the law reimposed on a finished work, and its whole function is to get you measuring your sonship by your behavior instead of by the blood. License comes dressed as freedom. It says grace means nothing matters, so indulge, and it sounds like the opposite of legalism, its sworn enemy. But watch the aim. Legalism makes you a slave performing for acceptance. License makes you a prodigal, numbing the ache of an identity you've forgotten. Different masks, same face. Both keep you from resting as a son, one by exhausting you, one by deadening you. Mysticism comes dressed as depth. It tells you the plain finished gospel is too simple, that real sons chase secret experiences, higher revelations, deeper encounters always one tier above where you are. It keeps you climbing toward a sonship that was handed to you free at the bottom of the ladder. Deadness comes dressed as nothing at all, the gray fog of a faith gone cold, where the words are still true, but they no longer land, and you cannot remember the last time son meant anything in your chest. Religious pride comes dressed as maturity. It is the elder brother in the parable, furious at grace, certain his sonship is a wage he earned by never leaving, and just as lost as the brother who did. Hyperspirituality comes dressed as zeal, always warring, always rebuking, always discerning demons behind every bush, so frantically busy fighting that it never once rests in the finished victory it claims to fight for. 6 costumes. Count them again and feel how different they look. Legalism and license are opposites. Deadness and hyperspirituality are opposites. Mysticism and religious pride could not be more unlike. If you defend against them as 6 separate enemies, you will spend your life building 6 separate walls and lose anyway, because they were never 6 enemies. They are one enemy, varying his tactics, serving one aim: obscure your sonship. The constant underneath the variation. Learn to see the constant, and the variation loses its power to confuse you. The skill this chapter demands is not more defenses. It is a trained eye. A son who has not yet learned to rest reacts to each costume on its own terms. The legalist mask makes him strive. The license mask makes him indulge. The deadness mask makes him despair. He is forever responding to the surface, and the surface keeps changing, so he is forever off balance, which is exactly the disorientation variation is designed to produce. But the son who has learned to rest develops a different reflex. When any of the 1,000 costumes appears, he asks one question: what is this trying to make me believe about who I am? And underneath every single mask, the answer comes back identical, that you are not simply, finally, irreversibly a son. The moment he sees the constant, the costume falls off, and he is no longer fighting legalism or license or deadness. He is just standing, again, on the one fact every tactic exists to topple. This is how you handle the troops. This is the understanding of variation that lets a commander stay calm while the battlefield shifts, because he is not tracking 100 moving threats. He is guarding one fixed treasure, and he knows that everything moving is moving toward it. There is a second, quieter instruction buried in Sun Tzu's chapter, and the son needs it. Do not assume the enemy is not coming. Be ready for the certainty that he will come. The general who survives is not the one who guesses correctly which road the attack will take. He is the one who has made his position so secure that it does not matter which road. He does not bet on predicting the costume. He fortifies the one thing every costume is coming for. Apply that to the war over your identity, and it sets you free from the exhausting game of trying to anticipate the enemy's next mask. You will not always guess right. Sometimes legalism, sometimes license, sometimes a fog you cannot name. Stop trying to predict the disguise. Fortify the sonship. Make your knowing of who you are so settled, so rooted in the finished declaration, that when any mask appears it finds the gate already barred. The son who has done this does not need to identify the tactic to defeat it. He has secured the only objective the tactic was ever after. Sun Tzu warns that variation in the enemy is only half the danger. The other half is the fault inside the commander, the soft spot in his own character that turns the enemy's tactic into a victory. He lists 5 faults that ruin a general. They map with eerie precision onto the 5 identity vulnerabilities the enemy exploits in a son who has not learned to rest. 1. Recklessness, which leads to destruction. In the son, this is the presumption that fights without the finished work under his feet. It is the believer who charges into spiritual war on the strength of his own zeal, certain his effort can win what only the blood secured. Recklessness skips the cross. It strives where it should rest, and it is destroyed not by the enemy's power but by its own. A son who knows he is a son does not need to be reckless. He fights from victory, never for it. 2. Cowardice, which leads to capture. This is the fear that runs from the identity question instead of standing in it. When the if comes, if you are really a son, the coward does not answer it as written. He flees. He avoids the accusation rather than facing it down with the finished word, and avoidance is capture. The fearful believer gets taken prisoner by the very doubt he refused to confront. Sonship does not flinch. It stands in the wilderness and lets the enemy run out of questions. 3. A hasty temper, provoked by insults, easily offended. This one is subtle and deadly. The son who is easily offended is a son whose identity is not yet settled, because only an unsettled identity can be insulted. When you secretly suspect you might not be a son, every slight confirms the fear, and you flare. But a son who knows who he is cannot be provoked into proving it. Jesus, insulted to his face, did not retaliate. His sonship was not on trial in another man's opinion. A hasty temper is a tell. It announces an identity still looking for confirmation in how others treat you. 4. A delicacy of honor, sensitive to shame, the need to defend yourself. Here is the over-delicate sense of honor. The compulsion to justify yourself, vindicate yourself, manage your reputation, prove your worth. It is exhausting, and it is a fault, because a son does not defend his sonship. It was declared over him from heaven. The believer, who must always defend himself, has quietly accepted that his standing depends on his case being heard. It does not. Christ is your defense, the blood is your verdict. The need to self-justify is the law smuggled back in through the gate of wounded pride. Lay your defense down. You are not on trial. The trial ended at Calvary, and the verdict was son. 5. Over-solicitude, over-anxiety, which exposes you to worry and trouble. The last fault is the chronic anxiety that smothers a son under the weight of outcomes he was never asked to carry. It looks like care. It feels responsible. But it is the refusal to trust a finished work and a faithful father, and it keeps the son in a permanent low-grade dread that something is about to expose him, fail him, undo him. A son who rests is not careless. He is carefree, in the deepest sense, because he has cast his anxiety onto the one who declared him and keeps him. Over-solicitude is the enemy's favorite slow leak. Never dramatic, always draining, quietly bleeding off the rest that sonship was supposed to provide. 5 faults. Notice they are not 5 sins to scrub off the surface. They are 5 places where an unsettled identity leaks. Recklessness, fear, offense, self-defense, anxiety. Every one of them dissolves the moment the identity underneath it is secured. You do not fix the 5 faults by working on the 5 faults. You fix them by knowing whose you are, because all 5 are merely symptoms of the one wound the enemy keeps reopening. The doubt that you are a son. So here is the war in its simplest form. The enemy will keep changing the mask, because changing masks is all he can do. He cannot change the truth of your sonship. That was sealed in blood he cannot touch. He cannot win the war, the cross already ended it. All that is left to him is disguise. 1,000 costumes, 6 religious masks, 5 exploitable faults, an endless variation of tactics across every season of your life. And every last one of them is the same enemy, wearing a different face, walking toward the same single objective. He keeps changing the mask because he only has one face. And the one face is one question: are you really a son? And the one question already has an answer, spoken from torn open heavens, before you did anything to deserve it, and still true after everything you've done since. This is why the war is, in the end, so strangely lopsided in your favor. An enemy with 1,000 tactics, but one objective, is an enemy you can fully understand. You will never out-improvise him on the surface. He has had millennia to perfect the costumes. But you do not have to. You only have to refuse the one thing all the costumes are asking: refuse to renegotiate who you are. Let legalism come, you are a son. Let license come, you are a son. Let the gray deadness and the frantic super-spirituality and the wounded pride and the secret mysticism all come in their turn. Under every one of them stands the same unmovable fact, and you simply keep standing on it. The variation is infinite. The answer is one word, and it never changes, because the one who spoke it does not change. Learn the constant, see through the costume, and let the variation exhaust itself against a son who simply will not stop knowing who he is. Hook, he keeps changing the mask because he only has one face. Sun Tzu spends the 9th chapter doing something strange for a war manual. He stops talking about strategy and starts talking about birds. Dust that rises in a high column means chariots. Dust low and wide means infantry. Birds gathering on a patch of ground mean it is empty. No enemy hides there. Birds bursting upward mean an ambush is set beneath them. Tree branches moving when there is no wind means the enemy is cutting a path toward you. The old general builds an entire intelligence doctrine out of reading what is small and easily ignored. He is teaching his commanders to see the battle before it arrives. That is this chapter. Because the identity ambush almost never announces itself. It does not kick the door in. It moves quietly behind a screen of ordinary feelings, and by the time you feel the blow, the trap has already closed. The enemy's whole advantage is that you read condemnation as the attack, when condemnation is only the dust cloud rising over a column already on the march. So we are going to learn the catalog of signs. Spiritual situational awareness. How to catch the move before it lands. Watch your own language. Not the words you say out loud, the grammar underneath your thoughts. A son operates from being. I am loved. I am accepted. I am righteous in him. I am his. That is the native dialect of sonship, and it is the dialect of the finished work. Romans 8 does not say you will become a child of God if your week goes well. It says the Spirit himself bears witness with your spirit that you are a child of God. Present tense. Settled fact. A status, not a score. The ambush begins the instant that grammar shifts. The I am goes quiet, and an I do slides into its place. I do my devotions. I do better this week. I do enough. I am doing okay. Am I doing enough? You will not notice the moment it happens, because it feels like maturity. It feels like taking your faith seriously. The enemy never markets the trap as a downgrade. He markets it as growth. But trace the shift, and you will find the whole war hidden in one preposition. Sonship lives on the word in righteous in Christ, accepted in the beloved, complete in him, says Colossians. The counterfeit lives on the word by, accepted by my consistency, secure by my performance, loved by the measure of my obedience. The day your inner monologue trades in for by, the birds have risen. Something is moving in the grass. This is sign number 1, and it is the earliest of all. Long before you feel guilty, you start to feel like a worker instead of a son. The orphan does not show up announced as an orphan. He shows up as an employee. Condemnation rarely arrives as a verdict. It arrives as a temperature. You wake up, and the room of your soul is a few degrees colder than it was. Nothing specific has happened. No great sin, no obvious failure. But there is a faint pressure behind everything, a low hum of not quite right with God. You reach for prayer, and it feels like calling a number that has been disconnected. You open the scriptures, and the words read like an audit. That cold front is the creep. And here is the diagnostic that exposes it. Condemnation always speaks about you, while conviction always speaks about a thing. The Spirit, when he corrects a son, is surgical and specific and kind. He names an action, points to a better way, and the whole transaction is soaked in belonging. Here, son, not that this. Condemnation is vague on purpose. It refuses to name the crime because it does not actually have one. It just leaves you with a diffuse sense of being wrong as a person. Wrong at the root. Wrong in your being. That vagueness is the tell. Specific correction comes from your father. Generalized self-suspicion comes from the accuser. One leaves you closer, the other leaves you cold. Learn to feel the temperature drop, and you will catch the ambush at the tree line instead of in the clearing. Some signs come slowly. This one snaps. You can be walking in real freedom, genuinely, not pretending. And then a single sentence detonates in your chest, and the orphan is back as though he never left. Who do you think you are? Look at you. After all this, you still struggle with that. You're not his. Not really. Not the way the real ones are. The voice is always second person, and it is always identity aimed. It does not bother with your behavior. It goes straight for your sonship. That is how you recognize an enemy round versus a stray thought. Random anxieties wander. The accuser's fire is targeted, and the target is never the sin. The target is the status. Watch for the speed. Orphan thinking has a signature velocity. A free son does not slowly reason his way to, I might not really be loved. He gets there in one jump because someone shoved him. When the fall from beloved to abandoned takes a fraction of a second and no actual evidence, you are not having a feeling. You are taking fire. Name it as incoming, and the round loses most of its power. Because a son who knows he is under attack does not mistake the attack for the truth. This is the most important sign in the catalog, and the easiest to miss, because it violates the order you expect. You assume the sequence runs, I fail, then I feel guilty. Cause, then effect. But pay close attention to the timeline of your own inner weather, and you will catch something uncanny. Often the dread comes first. A performance anxiety with no object. A bracing, a flinch, a low-grade fear of being measured, and only afterward does your mind go scrambling to find a failure to pin it on. The feeling precedes the charge. The fear is hunting for a crime to justify itself. In Sun Tzu's terms, this is the dust before the army. The column is already marching. The anxiety is the dust it kicks up, rising over the ridge before you can see a single soldier. If you wait until you can name what you did wrong, you have waited until the troops are in the clearing. But if you learn to notice the bracing itself, the sourceless flinch, the apprehension that something is about to demand an account from you, you have spotted the ambush while it is still behind the trees. And here is why this matters more than any other sign. The flinch reveals the enemy's actual objective. He is not after the sin. He never was. He is after a son who lives bracing, who relates to God with a perpetual cringe, who treats grace like a probation that could be revoked. The anxiety is the weapon. The accusation he ginned up afterward was only cover for it. Catch the bracing, and you catch the war itself naked, before it can dress up as guilt. There is one more sign, subtler than the rest, and it hides in your relationships. Watch what happens to other people in your eyes when an identity ambush is forming. A son who is resting secure can let other people be themselves. Their success is not his indictment. Their gifting is not his exposure. Their walk with God is not a scoreboard he is losing on. But the instant the orphan stirs, the people around you quietly turn into mirrors, and every one of them reflects back a verdict on you. Someone shares a victory, and you feel the floor tilt. Someone is further along, and it lands as a sentence against you. You start measuring, ranking, comparing, and comparison, almost always, is the orphan taking inventory. Sun Tzu told his commanders to read the enemy by watching for movement that didn't fit the landscape. Banks of reeds set up as screens, a sudden stir among the birds. This is your version. When admiration curdles into envy, when another believer's freedom irritates instead of gladdens you, when you cannot celebrate without first calculating where you stand. Something has moved in the grass. The comparison is not the disease. It is the symptom of an identity that has stopped resting in given and started competing for earned. A son does not need to win a ranking he was never entered into. The moment you feel yourself entered, read the sign. The column is on the march, and it has put your brothers and sisters between you and the truth, using the people you love as cover for the lie. A son who waits for the verdict before he reacts has already conceded the ground. By then, the lie is wearing the clothing of conscience, and you will spend the day trying to repent your way out of a fog that was never about a sin in the first place. You cannot repent of an ambush. You can only see it and refuse it. This is what makes discernment the decisive skill. Not because seeing the trap requires great strength. The opposite. Seeing the trap means you do not need great strength, because revelation does the work that striving never could. The son who reads the signs does not white-knuckle his way through condemnation. He recognizes it as enemy movement and turns to what is already true. There is therefore now no condemnation. Now, not eventually. The blood already answered the charge, the accuser is still trying to file. So train the eye. When your grammar slides from I am to I do, birds in flight. When the temperature drops with no named cause, dust on the horizon. When you fall from beloved to abandoned in a single second, incoming fire, targeted. When dread arrives before any failure and goes shopping for one, the column is already marching, and the flinch is the proof. None of these are the battle. They are the signs of the battle, and the son who learns to read them is never ambushed, because he is never surprised. He sees the move forming, and stands in the truth before it lands. He defends a finished work. He is not waiting to find out whether he is a son. He already knows, and knowing is the whole defense. The accuser's one advantage is that you mistake his approach for your own conscience. Take that advantage away, and the army marching toward your identity finds the clearing empty, the sun already gone to higher ground, standing where the verdict was rendered 2,000 years ago and cannot be reopened. Read the signs. The blow is never the first thing. There is always a tell. Hook, condemnation is the dust cloud. Something is marching behind it. Sun Tzu was obsessed with ground. He understood what amateurs never do, that battles are not won by the braver army or even the larger one. They are won by the army that knows the terrain it is standing on. The same soldiers who are unstoppable on open ground will die in a narrow pass. The same charge that wins on the heights becomes a slaughter on entangling ground. The general's first and gravest duty is not courage. It is knowing where his feet are. The believer fights on 6 grounds too, not geographical. These are states of belief, terrains of the soul, and most sons lose for years without ever realizing the problem was never their effort. The problem was the ground they were standing on. Let me name all 6, because the son who knows them is sure of victory, and the son who doesn't is sure of defeat, and the difference is not how hard he fights. Sun Tzu calls the first kind accessible ground, terrain that both sides can move across freely, where the army that reaches the high sunny side first and keeps its supply lines open will win. This is the native country of the sun. Open grace, the ground where the finished work is simply true, and you stand on it without negotiating for it. Here the access is total. We have access by faith into this grace in which we stand. Says Romans 5, and the word is stand, present and permanent. There is no toll booth at the border. You did not earn your way onto this ground, and you cannot be evicted from it, because the one who purchased it will not be repaid in installments of your performance. On open grace, sin loses its terror and obedience loses its strain, because both stop being about your standing. You already stand. The high ground is yours and the supply line, the steady inflow of you are loved, you are his. It is finished, runs unbroken. This is where the sun is meant to live. Most of the rest of this chapter is about how he gets pulled off it. Sun Tzu describes entangling ground with a chilling precision. You can go out easily, but it is hard to get back. You advance, and if the enemy is unprepared, you may win. But if he is ready and you fail, return is impossible, and you are caught. This is the central trap of the entire war. Burn this paragraph into your memory. Mixture, law blended with grace, is entangling ground, easy to enter and brutal to leave. Here is how easy the entrance is. Nobody decides to abandon grace. No son wakes up and renounces the cross. The entrance to mixture is a single innocent-sounding word. End. Grace and my effort. The finished work and my consistency. Jesus paid it all, and now I keep my end up. It sounds humble. It sounds responsible. It sounds like exactly what a serious Christian ought to believe. You step onto the ground without a flicker of alarm because every step felt like devotion. And then you cannot get back. That is what makes mixture the deadliest terrain there is. On open grace, you know you are resting in Christ. On the distant ground of unbelief, you at least know you have walked away. But mixture feels like faith. It uses the right vocabulary. It sings the right songs. The son trapped here still talks about grace. He just adds a silent clause that grace covers the past while his effort secures the future. He is not resting, and he is not openly rebelling. He is striving inside Christian language, which is the one prison that disguises itself as the kingdom. Galatians is the field report from this ground. Are you so foolish? Having begun by the Spirit, are you now being perfected by the flesh? Paul is not writing to pagans. He is writing to sons who started on open grace and drifted, one and at a time, onto entangling ground, and could not find their way home. A little leaven, he says, leavens the whole lump. You cannot quarantine a drop of law to the past tense. It works through the whole batch until the gospel still on your lips no longer reaches your gut. Most sons get stuck here for years, not because they are rebellious, because they are sincere, and their sincerity keeps them digging in deeper on the worst possible ground. They redouble their effort, which on entangling ground only entangles them further. The way out is never more effort. The way out is the revelation that there was never an and, that it was finished, fully, with nothing left for you to add, and that adding to a finished work does not honor it. It insults it. Sun Tzu warns about narrow passes, confined terrain where an army gets bottled up and a small force can pin a large one. If you reach the pass first, garrison it and wait. If the enemy holds it, do not attack. Withdraw and draw him out into the open. Condemnation is that narrow pass. It is constricted ground, and the sun caught in it cannot maneuver. Every thought funnels through a single choke point. I'm wrong, I've failed, God is displeased, and the more he struggles, the tighter the walls press in. You cannot fight your way forward through condemnation. The pass is too narrow for the army of your effort. Sincere believers spend whole seasons bottled up here, trying to feel forgiven enough to move, and the trying only jams them harder against the rock. The old general's counsel is exact. Do not assault the pass on the enemy's terms. Withdraw to open ground. The son does not break out of condemnation by mustering enough remorse. He withdraws back onto open grace, back to, there is now no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus, and lets the truth draw him out where he can move again. The pass is only deadly when you try to win it. Refuse the engagement, and the ground itself loses its power. The high ground was Sun Tzu's prize on every kind of terrain. Seize the sunny heights, hold the elevation, make the enemy fight uphill. For the sun, the heights are revelation, those moments when the finished work stops being doctrine and becomes sight. When you don't merely believe you're a son, you see it, and the seeing changes the gravity of everything. From the heights, the accuser's army looks like what it is. Small, already defeated, fighting uphill against a verdict it cannot overturn. Paul prays for exactly this elevation in Ephesians, that the eyes of your heart would be enlightened, that you would know. Knowing is the high ground. Everything is easier from up there, not because you are stronger, but because you can finally see the whole field, and what you see is a war the cross already won. Sun Tzu's distant ground is terrain far from the enemy, where the forces are evenly matched, and to march out and provoke battle is a disadvantage. You exhaust yourself crossing the gap and arrive too spent to win. Unbelief is distant ground. It is the soul too far from the truth to engage it, where the promises of God feel like rumors from a country you have never visited. The sun out here is not in agony like the one in the pass. He is just remote, his heart at a distance from the very gospel that is his home. The danger of distant ground is not pain. It is drift, the slow widening of the gap, until you are a son, sounds like a slogan instead of your name. The march back is long only because the soul let itself wander so far. But the ground belongs to him still. It is always a march home, never an invasion of foreign country. Last, the contested ground, terrain both sides want, where the fighting is fiercest and possession constantly changes hands. This is mixed teaching. The pulpits, the books, the feeds where grace and law are served in the same sentence, and the son cannot tell which flag flies over the field. One paragraph sets him free. The next puts him back under the lash, and he leaves a service unsure whether he is beloved or on probation. Contested ground is dangerous precisely because it is almost true. The error is never total. That would be easy to spot. It is grace with a hook in it, freedom with a fine print, and the son who cannot read the terrain takes the hook with the bread. Hold this ground by testing every word against one question. Does this leave me resting in a finished work or laboring toward an unfinished one? That single test holds the line. Notice that these 6 are not 6 unrelated countries. They are a campaign map, and the enemy has preferred routes between them. He almost never marches a resting son straight from open grace to outright unbelief. The gap is too wide, the move too obvious, the birds would scatter and you'd see it coming. So he routes you through mixture. Mixture is the staging ground for everything else, the road the whole campaign travels on. From open grace, one at a time, he eases you onto entangling ground. And once you're standing on mixture, the other defeats come almost for free. Watch the sequence. A son on mixture is striving inside Christian language, which means he is constantly, quietly, falling short of a standard he has secretly reimposed on himself. So when he stumbles, there is no finished work to fall back onto. He has spent the week leaning on his own performance, and he tumbles straight into the narrow pass of condemnation. Trapped in the pass, jammed tighter the harder he tries, he eventually concludes the promises just don't work for someone like him, and he drifts out onto the distant ground of unbelief. Mixture feeds the pass feeds the drift. Every collapse you've watched in yourself or someone else most likely ran down this exact slope, and it started on the one ground that felt the most like faith, which is why the contested ground of mixed teaching is so much more dangerous than it looks. It is the recruiting station for mixture. Every sermon that adds a hook to grace, every book that smuggles a fine print into the finished work, is loading sincere sons onto the road that ends in the pass. And the only ground that reverses the whole flow is the heights, revelation. From the heights you can see the map, see the routes, see that the entrance to mixture was a lie about and that was never there. You don't fight your way back up the slope. You get lifted by sight, and from the heights every other ground is suddenly easy to refuse. 6 grounds. Open grace, where the son is meant to live. Mixture, the entangling trap that swallows years. The narrow pass of condemnation, where effort only jams you tighter. The heights of revelation, where everything is easier. The distant ground of unbelief, a long march home. And the contested ground of mixed teaching, where the truth changes hands sentence by sentence. The general who knows the 6 is sure of victory. The one who doesn't is sure of defeat, and never knows why, because he keeps blaming his effort when the problem was always his footing. Before you fight another battle for your identity, ask the commander's first question. Not am I trying hard enough? Ask, what ground am I standing on? Hook, half-law is the most dangerous ground there is. You can't tell you're losing. Sun Tzu catalogs 9 situations an army can find itself in, and he saves the most terrible for last. He calls it death ground. It is the position from which there is no retreat, a place hemmed in on every side, where the river is at your back and the cliff is at your front and the enemy is in your face, and the only directions left are forward into the fight or down into the grave. And here is the part that confounds every comfortable strategist. Sun Tzu does not tell his generals to avoid death ground. He tells them to use it. He tells them, in the most counterintuitive line in the entire book, that an army on death ground is the most dangerous army there is. Throw your soldiers where there is no escape, he says, and they will prefer death to flight. A man with nowhere to run does not run. He turns and fights with a ferocity that a comfortable, well-supplied, retreat-having soldier can never summon. The very thing that should mean certain defeat becomes the source of unstoppable strength. He had stumbled onto the deepest secret of the gospel without knowing it, because the Son of God has a death ground. It is the most important real estate in this entire war. It is the place where the enemy's whole arsenal turns to ash, where every threat he owns becomes useless, where the Son is most free precisely, because he has nothing left to defend and nowhere left to run. The Son's death ground is the cross. Galatians 2:20 is the most strategically radical sentence Paul ever wrote, and most Christians read straight past its first half to get to the comfortable bit. I have been crucified with Christ. Stop there. Sit in it. Crucified. Past tense. Completed action. Not I am crucifying myself daily, not I am working toward death to self, not I will be crucified if I try hard enough. It already happened. When Christ died, you died. The old self, the orphan, the striver, the one who could be threatened and bribed and condemned, was nailed up and executed 2,000 years ago, and the execution took. This is death ground. The old man has the river at his back. There is no retreat for him because he is already dead, and a dead man does not retreat. He cannot reconsider. He cannot negotiate a way back to the life he had. The cross is the position from which there is no return, and Paul does not present this as a tragedy to be mourned. He presents it as the foundation of everything that follows. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. The death is what makes the new life unassailable. Romans 6 hands the Son his marching orders for occupying this ground. Reckon yourselves dead indeed unto sin, but alive unto God through Jesus Christ. Reckon. Count it true. Take it as the fixed fact it is. You are not asked to achieve death to the old self by your willpower. You are asked to reckon, to agree with a verdict already rendered, to stand on a fact already accomplished. The enemy's entire campaign depends on you not reckoning. He needs you to believe the old man is still alive and still in charge, still the thing God is angry at, still the self you have to defend and improve and apologize for. Reckon yourself dead, and you take from him the only target he was ever aiming at. Now watch what death ground does to the enemy's weapons, one by one. This is the part Sun Tzu felt in his bones, but could not have explained. Why the man with no escape is the most dangerous man on the field. It is because every weapon of war is, at bottom, a threat. And a threat is a transaction. It works by offering you a future you want to avoid, pain, loss, exposure, death, and demanding that you alter your behavior to escape it. The whole machinery of intimidation runs on one assumption, that you have something left to lose. That is the leverage. Take away the thing you fear losing, and every threat in the enemy's arsenal misfires. This is why you cannot threaten a dead man. Hold a blade to a corpse, and the corpse does not flinch. Promise a dead man ruin, and he does not bargain. Offer him his life back if he will only betray his post, and there is no one home to take the deal. Death has removed every handle by which fear used to grip him. He has already lost everything the threat was built to threaten, which means the threat has nothing to grip. The Son who has reckoned himself crucified with Christ stands in exactly that immunity. What is the accuser's leverage over a man who has already died? He comes with condemnation, but condemnation is a threat against your standing, and the crucified Son has no standing left to lose. His standing is now Christ's, and Christ cannot be condemned. He comes with the fear of death, the oldest weapon, the one Hebrews says held men in lifelong slavery, but you cannot frighten with death a man who has already passed through it. He comes with shame, with the threat of exposure, but a corpse has no reputation to protect. Every weapon assumes a self that wants to survive. Death ground has put that self in the grave. This is the freedom Sun Tzu glimpsed, and the gospel completes. On death ground the Son is most free, not least. Free because there is nothing left to defend. Free because there is no one left to threaten. The orphan was 1,000 pressure points, a body of fears the enemy could press at will. The crucified Son is a sealed fortress with no door, because the only door, the self that could be bargained with, is dead. But the cross is not a grave the Son lies down in. Death ground is half the truth, and the lesser half. Reckon yourself dead, Paul says, and alive unto God. The river at your back is not the end of the line. It is the threshold of resurrection. This is where the enemy's defeat becomes total. He could perhaps make peace with a dead son. A corpse fights no battles. But the Son did not stay dead. If we have been united with him in a death like his, we shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. The same power that raised Christ from the dead now operates in the Son, and that changes the equation past all recovery. A dead man cannot be threatened. A risen man cannot be stopped. Consider what the enemy now faces. He cannot kill the Son again, that death is finished, swallowed up in victory. He cannot keep the Son in the grave. The resurrection already proved the grave cannot hold what belongs to God. He cannot bribe the Son with the old life. The old life is buried, and the new life is hidden with Christ in God where no thief can reach it, says Colossians. He has lost every angle. Threat fails against the dead. Force fails against the risen. Seduction fails against a man whose treasure is sealed in heaven. The most dangerous soldier on any field is the one who has already died and come back, because there is no longer anything you can do to him. This is why the early sons of God could be thrown to lions and sing. The empire that ran on the fear of death met a people who had already died and could not be threatened with the only weapon Rome truly owned. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? That was not bravado. That was a battlefield report from death ground, from soldiers who had reckoned the old self crucified and found, on the far side of the river, that the worst the enemy could do had already been done, and they were still standing, alive unto God. So how does a son live here? Not by manufacturing it. You do not crucify yourself. That is the whole point, and the striver who tries only proves he has not understood. The cross is not a discipline you perform. It is a position you occupy, by reckoning by faith, by agreeing with the verdict already passed on the old man and the life already breathed into the new. When the threat comes, and it will come dressed as condemnation, as fear, as the old performance anxiety, the son does not muster a defense. Defense assumes there is something still alive to protect. Instead he reckons, that man is dead. I was crucified with Christ. You are negotiating with a corpse, and there is no one here to take your terms. And then, in the same breath, he reckons the rest. And the one who lives in me now cannot be condemned, cannot be killed, cannot be stopped. The life I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. That is death ground, the place of no retreat that turns out to be the place of total freedom. The position the enemy most wants you to flee is the one position where he cannot touch you. He spends the whole war trying to coax you off the cross and back onto open field, where you have a self to lose and a future to fear, back to defending, earning, surviving. He wants you anywhere but the grave that became a doorway. Stand your ground. The river is at your back for a reason. You have already died, and the worst thing the enemy can do to a man has already been done to you and undone in you. There is nothing left to threaten and nothing left to defend, and out of that emptiness comes a courage no comfortable soldier will ever know. On death ground, fight. Or better, on death ground, rest, because the fight is already won and the one who won it lives in you. Hook, you can't threaten a dead man, and you can't stop a risen one. Fire is the most efficient weapon Sun Tzu describes. It does not need to be carried into battle. It needs only to be started. You light one spark on the windward edge of an enemy camp, and the wind finishes the campaign for you. The genius of fire is that the victim provides the fuel. The general who attacks with fire does almost nothing. He waits. He watches the weather. And he lets the enemy's own tents, his own stores, his own baggage burn him alive. The enemy of your soul knows this doctrine better than any field marshal who ever lived. He has watched it work across 6,000 years of human history, and he has noticed something. He does not have to manufacture the fire. You already have it in you. You are flammable. The flesh is dry tinder, and a fence is a struck match, and all he has to do is throw it where the wind is blowing and step back to watch. So understand the chapter you are standing in. This is the attack by fire. And the fire he wants to light is not in the world around you. It is in your soul. Sun Tzu names 5 targets, and the enemy keeps his own list of 5. He will try to burn your camp, your rest, the place where you sleep, your peace. He will try to burn your stores, your reserves of joy, the supply you draw on when circumstances run thin. He will try to burn your baggage train, the slow logistics of a life walked with God, the daily provision. He will try to burn your arsenals, the truths you have stockpiled, the promises you stand on. And he will hurl dropping fire among you, the random spark, the offense from nowhere, the text that lands at 11 at night and burns until dawn. But look closer. Every one of these fires runs on the same fuel, passion without sonship, zeal without a father, heat that does not come from the throne. Scripture has a word for this kind of fire. It calls it strange fire. Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took their censers, put fire in them, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them. Hold the terror and the mercy of that story in one image. There was already fire on the altar. God had sent it. It was holy, it was provided, it was his. And the sons reached, past the fire God had given and brought their own. That is the entire conspiracy in a single sentence. The enemy does not need you to stop burning. He would be thrilled to see you burn hot. He only needs the fire to be yours, sourced in your effort, your wound, your spleen instead of the Father's. Strange fire and holy fire can look identical from a distance. Both are bright. Both consume. Both feel like zeal. The difference is the source. And the difference between the two sources is the difference between a sun warmed and a sun burned to the ground. Here is where Sun Tzu's warning lands, with a force you may not expect. He spends the back half of his fire chapter not on tactics, but on temperament. No ruler should put troops into the field merely to gratify his own spleen. No general should fight a battle simply out of pique. The most aggressive chapter in the most aggressive manual of the ancient world ends with a plea for emotional sobriety. Why? Because Sun Tzu understood that the commander who fights from anger has already surrendered his judgment. He moves when he should wait. He commits when he should hold. The enemy does not have to outthink him. The enemy only has to provoke him. Now hear it in the key of sonship. The son who fights from a wounded identity is already fighting the enemy's way. Read that again slowly, because it is the spine of this chapter. Offense is not a side issue in the war for your identity. Offense is the war, conducted by other means. When you are insulted and you flare, when you are overlooked and you smolder, when you are accused and you spend 3 sleepless nights assembling the case for your defense. The question underneath all of it is the same question that has haunted you from the beginning. Am I really a son? A settled son is hard to set on fire. He has nothing to prove and therefore nothing to defend. But a son who secretly suspects he is a servant, a hireling, an applicant still waiting on a verdict. That man is dry wood, and every offense is a match. The enemy cannot make you sin. He has been telling you he can, but it was always a bluff. What he can do is get you angry on his behalf. He can get you to pick up his fire and call it righteousness. He can get you to burn down your own peace in the name of being right. And notice the cruelty of the design. The fire he lights in you never burns him. It burns you your rest, your relationships, your nights, your joy. He strikes the match, and you supply the camp. By the time the smoke clears, you have scorched the very people you were trying to protect, defended a verdict that was never in question, and exhausted reserves you can never quite get back. The enemy paid nothing. You paid everything. That is what it means to be attacked by fire. The weapon cost the attacker almost nothing because the fuel was always going to be you. Let me name the most seductive fire of all, because you have felt it, and somewhere in you, you have loved it. Offense feels like clarity. When someone wrongs you and the heat rises, there is a moment when everything seems suddenly, gloriously sharp. You can see exactly who is in the wrong. You can feel the rightness of your cause burning in your chest like a furnace. You feel awake. You feel strong. You feel, for the first time in days, like you matter, because here at last is a battle you understand and an enemy you can name. That feeling is the single most reliable piece of evidence that you have picked up strange fire, because real authority is not hot. It is settled. Jesus, before his accusers, did not flare. He opened not his mouth. The son who knew exactly who he was had no spleen to gratify, no point to prove, no fire to defend, because the verdict over his life had already been spoken from heaven. This is my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased. You cannot threaten a man who has heard that sentence over his life. You can only stand there watching him decline the match you keep holding out. The flesh's zeal is loud and brittle. The spirit's fire is quiet and inexhaustible. Paul, who once breathed threats and murder, who carried as much religious fire as any man alive, looked back on all of it and called it loss, rubbish, dung. Why? Because it was strange fire. It was zeal, white-hot and sincere, and it was burning down the very thing it imagined it was defending. He was so on fire for God that he was killing the sons of God. That is what fervor without a father does. It does not lack heat. It lacks a home. There is a fire the enemy loves above all the personal ones, and it is corporate. He will gladly fund a counterfeit revival. He will pour gasoline on a movement, manufacture goosebumps, engineer momentum, and step back to watch, because a crowd burning with the wrong fire is more useful to him than a crowd that has gone cold. Cold people know they need something. Burning people are convinced they have already found it. So how do you tell holy fire from strange fire when both rooms are full of zeal? By the source and by the fruit. Strange fire makes much of the experience. Holy fire makes much of the sun. Strange fire leaves you craving the next hit. Holy fire leaves you knowing the Father. Strange fire produces performers. Holy fire produces sons. Strange fire burns out because effort cannot sustain itself. Holy fire is a bush that burns and is not consumed because it was never your fuel in the first place, it was his presence. The wind of Pentecost did not whip up the disciples' enthusiasm. It came from heaven, like a rushing mighty wind, and the tongues of fire that rested on each of them did not consume a single one. That is the signature of holy fire. It warms the sun, it does not burn him up. The Spirit is fire that has made peace with you. It illuminates without incinerating. It refines without destroying. It is the fire already on the altar, provided by God Himself, so that you would never have to bring your own. So what do you do when the fire comes? Because it will come. The offense will arrive, perfectly aimed, perfectly timed on the worst possible night. You do what Sun Tzu begged the angry general to do, and what the cross has already made possible for you. You do not move from wrath. You let the match fall, and you refuse to be tinder. Not by gritting your teeth, that is just dry wood pretending to be wet. You refuse to burn by remembering what you are. The accusation cannot find purchase on a son who already knows the verdict. The insult cannot start a fire where there is no fuel of insecurity left to catch. This is not passivity. Anger may in time change to gladness. Vexation may be succeeded by content, but a kingdom once destroyed never comes again into being. Sun Tzu is pleading with the commander to keep the long view, to refuse to torch in a single hour what took years to build. Your peace is that kingdom. Your rest in sonship is the very thing the enemy most wants you to burn down in a moment of heat, because he knows a son at rest is a son he cannot beat. So he provokes, and waits for the spark. Do not give it to him. Let the holy fire burn, the fire that draws you toward the Father, the fire that warms the room without ruining the people in it. And when the strange fire comes, dressed up as righteous indignation, offering you the intoxicating clarity of having been wronged, recognize it for the weapon it is. The enemy is not handing you a cause. He is handing you a match, and the camp he means to burn is yours. Offense feels like power. It's just the enemy's match. Sun Tzu spent 12 chapters teaching you how to maneuver, how to position, how to attack with fire, how to cross rivers and read terrain. And then, in his final chapter, he hands you the secret that holds the other 12 together. Everything you have learned is downstream of one thing. Not strength, not numbers, not courage, information. He is almost angry about it. He calls it the height of inhumanity to send 100,000 men to die, because the sovereign was too cheap to pay for intelligence. Armies face each other for years, he says, and the whole thing is decided in a single day, and that day belongs to whichever side knew. The war is not won by the bigger force. It is won by the better informed one. The decisive weapon in all of warfare is for knowledge. Now turn the page on him, because here is where Sun Tzu reaches the edge of what an ancient general could see. This foreknowledge cannot be elicited from spirits. It cannot be obtained by deductive calculation. It can only come from men. He knew exactly where to draw the line of human possibility. The war for your identity is decided 1 inch past that line. The foreknowledge you need does not come from omens or analysis or other men. It comes from the spirit of truth. And that changes everything. Step back and look at the shape of the entire campaign you have been studying. The cross already won the war. Satan has no path to victory. That road was closed at Calvary, sealed by an empty tomb, signed in resurrection. He has no army that can take the field against a finished work. He has no weapon that can wound a man God has already raised with Christ. The legal case is closed. The verdict is in. The Son is seated, and you are seated in him. So what has the enemy been doing for 2,000 years? If he cannot win, why does he keep fighting? Because there is one campaign still available to a defeated foe. Keep the victory secret. He cannot beat you. He can only keep you from finding out that you have already won. The entire post-Calvary war is not a military operation at all. It is a counterintelligence operation run against a single piece of information. You are a son of God. That is the one fact he exists to suppress. Every other tactic, the guilt, the religion, the law, the striving, the fire of the last chapter, serves that one objective. Keep the leak from spreading. Keep the son in the dark about his sonship. Which means the whole war, from the first chapter of this book to this one, has been a war over information. And a war over information is won by intelligence, by knowing. Sun Tzu organizes his agents into 5 classes: local spies, inward spies, converted spies, doomed spies, surviving spies. And he says that when all 5 are at work and no one can discover the secret system, this is called divine manipulation of the threads, the sovereign's most precious faculty. The general who holds the network sees the whole board. The general without it is blind, no matter how strong his arm. Jesus, on the last night before the cross, told his disciples he was giving them a network. Not 5 spies. One Spirit. I will pray the Father, and he shall give you another Comforter, that he may abide with you forever, even the Spirit of truth. And then he spelled out the function. When he, the Spirit of truth, is come, he will guide you into all truth. He shall take of what is mine, and show it unto you. That is an intelligent service. That is for knowledge that does not come from spirits or omens or human deduction, but from the very mind of God deposited inside you. The Spirit's whole assignment is to declassify what heaven knows about you and leak it past the enemy's blockade into your awareness. The enemy is running counterintelligence to keep you from knowing you are a son. The Spirit is running counterintelligence, and he cannot be jammed, bribed, or turned. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. Read that as the field report it is. The deepest intelligence in the universe, your true status, your real identity, the very fact the enemy has spent millennia trying to bury, is being broadcast continuously into your spirit by an agent who never sleeps and cannot be captured. The war is being won inside you right now, one whisper at a time, child, son, heir. Mine. Consider what kind of network this is. A human intelligence service depends on assets who can be flipped, channels that can be intercepted, couriers who can be caught at the border. Every secret an army holds is one captured messenger away from the enemy's table. But this network has no border the enemy can guard and no courier he can intercept, because the line runs from the throne of God directly into your spirit, a frequency the enemy cannot tune to and cannot drown out. He may shout over it. He cannot silence it. He may flood the air with static, accusation, religion, noise, but the witness keeps transmitting underneath all of it, patient and unhurried, because it is not trying to win a debate. It is simply reporting a fact. You are a son. The Father said so. The Spirit confirms it. And the only thing standing between you and total freedom is whether you will believe your own intelligence service over the enemy's propaganda. That is the war in one sentence. 2 voices, 1 frequency you trust. The enemy's entire strategy is to make his counterfeit transmission feel more real than the Spirit's true one. He cannot change the fact, he can only contest the airwaves. And the son who learns to recognize the voice that confirms over the voice that condemns has, in that single act of discernment, won. So let us say plainly, the thing this entire book has been circling. You do not win this war by fighting harder. You win it by finding out. The decisive weapon is not effort. It is not discipline. It is not even faith understood as striving. The decisive weapon is knowing. Revelation. The lights coming on in a room you were told was a prison, and discovering the door was never locked. Jesus put the whole strategy into 8 words. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Notice what he did not say. He did not say the truth will set you free once you have worked hard enough to deserve it. He did not say struggle will set you free, or sincerity, or sacrifice. He said knowing. The freedom is in the foreknowledge. The chains are not made of iron, they are made of ignorance. And ignorance dies the instant the truth is known. This is why the enemy fights your information and not your effort. He is delighted to let you strive. He will cheer you on as you exhaust yourself trying to earn what you already own. Because a son who is busy earning is a son who has not found out. And a son who has not found out is a son still inside the deception, still fighting the wrong war on the wrong field. Your striving does not threaten him. Your knowing does. The moment you know, the war is over, because the war was only ever about whether you would know. A son who knows he is a son is unstoppable, not because he becomes strong, but because he stops fighting for what he already has and begins fighting from it. He cannot be condemned because he knows the verdict. He cannot be deceived about his identity because the Spirit has confirmed it from the inside. He cannot be lured back into earning because he has read the documents and the work is finished. He is not a soldier hoping to win. He is a son defending a victory already secured. This is why Sun Tzu insists that on intelligence depends the army's ability to move. Without it, the whole host is frozen, strong, armed, ready, and utterly paralyzed, because it does not know where to step. That paralysis has a name in the life of a believer. It is the strange stuckness of a Christian who possesses every promise and walks in none of them. He has the Bible. He has the doctrine. He can recite the verses. And still he creeps through his days half condemned, because the information has never moved from his head into his knowing. He is an army with maps it has never believed. The Spirit's work is to take the truth off the page and detonate it in your spirit until it becomes yours, until you do not merely affirm that you are a son, but know it the way you know your own name. And the whole army of your life finally begins to move. Close the loop now with where we began. Back in Chapter 3, Sun Tzu gave us the line that organizes everything else. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. 2 pieces of intelligence, both required, and the use of spies is how you obtain them. Know the enemy. You now know him. You hold his entire playbook. He cannot win, he can only deceive. Deception is his single weapon. His objective is one fact, and his method is to keep that fact secret. He has no plan B, no fallback, no reserve, because a liar owns nothing but his lie, and the moment it is exposed, he has nothing left. You know the enemy now. The fog you fought behind has lifted. Know yourself, and here is the intelligence the Spirit has been leaking to you through 13 chapters. You are a son of God, not a servant auditioning for the role, not a prisoner hoping for parole. A son named, seated, sealed, defending a finished work, walking in a victory you did not earn and cannot lose. The cross was your death ground, and on death ground there is nowhere to retreat and nothing left to do but live as exactly what you are. Know the enemy. Know yourself. Sun Tzu promised that the general who held both would not fear the result of 100 battles. The Spirit of truth has now placed both in your hands. The fog is gone. The enemy is exposed. Your identity is confirmed by the only source that cannot be jammed. The intelligence war is won, and it was the only war there ever was. The war was always, only, about whether you'd find out. You just found out. Every conspiracy depends on secrecy. That is its single point of failure. A plot can survive 100 difficulties. Opposition, betrayal, bad luck, the loss of resources, but it cannot survive being seen. The moment the strategy is understood, it stops working. The double agent whose face is now known cannot operate. The trap that everyone can see is no longer a trap. It's just a hole in the ground that people walk around. Exposure is the one thing a conspiracy can never recover from. That is why this book exists, and that is what just happened to you. For 13 chapters, we have walked the enemy's entire campaign, room by room, using the oldest manual of strategy as a flashlight. And what we found was not a war. It was a cover-up. The devil is not, and never was, primarily trying to make you sin. Sin was a tactic. Religion was a tactic. The law, the guilt, the striving, the offense, the strange fire, all of it tactics. Diversions. Smoke laid down to hide the one fact he could not afford you to know. You are a son of God. That was the secret. That was the whole secret. The entire machinery of hell, every accusation and every lie and every exhausting religious treadmill was built around a single objective. Keep that one sentence from reaching the one person it was about. You. And now you've read it. The conspiracy is exposed. And an exposed conspiracy has no future. Before we send you out, let the whole campaign come back into view at once, because you have been walking it chapter by chapter, and it is time to see the map entire. We began by laying the plans, and we learned that the only battlefront that has ever mattered is the question of identity. We waged the war by stratagem and discovered the enemy fights with deception, never force. We took up the energy of the spirit and the weakness and strength of flesh and grace, and we learned that you defend a finished work. You do not earn a future one. We marched through the maneuvering and the variation of tactics and the army on the march, and at every turn the terrain was the same terrain, your own heart, and the single fact the enemy needed buried in it. We came to death ground the cross, and learned that a son with nowhere to retreat is the most dangerous man alive, because he has stopped trying to survive and started simply living as what he is. We saw the attack by fire and learned that offense is only the enemy's match, and that strange fire and holy fire differ not in heat but in source. And we came to the use of spies and named the decisive weapon out loud. Not effort, not striving, but knowing. Revelation. The truth that sets you free precisely because you finally know it. Every thread runs to the same knot. Identity doubt was the only real battlefront. Deception was the enemy's only weapon. Knowing was the decisive weapon every time. The cross was death ground. Mixture, law blended into grace, was the trap laid on every road. And the posture that won was always the same posture. Defend the finished work, do not earn a future one. 13 chapters, 1 war, 1 secret. And now the secret is out. Understand the position the enemy is in, because it will change how you walk for the rest of your life. He cannot beat you. That was settled at the cross, where the finished work was signed in blood and sealed in resurrection. There is no army he can raise against a man God has already raised with Christ. There is no charge he can file against a son God has already justified. Who shall lay anything to the charge of God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is he that condemns? The courtroom is empty. The case is closed. The judge is your Father, and the verdict came in your favor before you were born. So the enemy's only campaign was deception. Not victory, he had no path to that. Only concealment. He had one move, keep you from knowing. And the terrible, fragile genius of that move was that it only worked in the dark. It depended entirely on your ignorance. The whole crushing weight of the war you've been fighting, the condemnation, the never enough, the suspicion that you were a fraud, a hireling, a servant still waiting on a verdict, all of it rested on a single secret. You're now the leak. He had one secret to keep, and you are the breach in the wall. The information is out. The Spirit of truth has confirmed it from the inside, the cross has proven it from history, and this book has spelled it out in plain language. You are a son of God. And here is the consequence the enemy dreads above all others. There is no second secret. There is no plan B. He had exactly one card, and you've turned it face up. Against a son who knows, he has nothing left. The fog is his entire arsenal, and you've walked out of it into the daylight. So here is the turn the whole book has been driving toward. It is small in words and total in consequence. Stop fighting for sonship. Start fighting from it. You have spent years, maybe your whole life, fighting for something you already possessed, trying to earn a father who already named you, striving to become a son when you were one before you took your first striving breath. That was the deception working exactly as designed. Every ounce of effort poured into earning was an ounce of evidence that you hadn't yet found out. The enemy didn't mind your effort. He loved it. A son busy earning is a son still inside the lie. But a son who knows doesn't fight to win the war. He fights from a war already won. There is a universe of difference between those two postures, and you can feel it in your chest. The first is anxious. It's always auditioning, always one failure away from disqualification, always glancing at the judge to read his face. The second is settled. It has heard the verdict. It defends a finished work instead of laboring toward an uncertain one. It does not strive to become, it walks as what it already is. This is the whole posture of the New Testament son. You do not fight your way up onto death ground. The cross already put you there, and on death ground there is no retreat and no audition. There is only living as the dead Andre's son you are. You do not blend the law back into grace, because mixture is the oldest trap and a drop of earning poisons the whole cup of grace. You do not pursue a future verdict, because you were given the verdict in advance, in Christ, before the foundation of the world. You defend a finished work. You do not earn a future one. That is what it means to walk as a son. So walk, not towards sonship, as a son. Wake up tomorrow already loved, already named, already seated, and let the day be lived from that fact instead of toward it. When the accusation comes, and it will come, because the enemy doesn't stop running a play just because it's been exposed. He gambles that you'll forget. You will recognize it now for the bluff it is. You'll feel the old pull to defend yourself, to prove yourself, to pick up the match and burn. And you'll decline. Not because you're strong, but because you know. A son who knows is unstoppable, not because he becomes mighty, but because he stops fighting battles the cross already won. Knowing is the weapon. It always was. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Not effort, not religion, not the desperate, exhausting project of becoming acceptable. Knowing. The lights coming on in a room you were told was a cell, and finding the door standing open, and realizing it was never locked. That it was never even a door, only a painting of one. And you've been leaning your whole weight against an image of a wall. The Spirit will keep bearing witness with your spirit that you are a child of God. That broadcast never stops and cannot be jammed. The enemy will keep trying to talk over it. But you've learned to hear the difference now between the voice that condemns and the voice that confirms. One makes you strive. The other makes you rest. Follow the one that calls you son. And do not be surprised when the fight feels real on the days it comes. Exposed strategies still get attempted. A beaten enemy still throws punches he knows can't land, hoping you've forgotten that they can't. There will be mornings the old weight settles back on your chest, and the verdict feels in doubt, and the painted door looks solid again. That is not the war reopening. That is the enemy running a dead play, betting on your amnesia. On those mornings, you do not need a new revelation. You need to remember the one you already have. Preach to yourself the thing this book put in your hands. The cross won, the case is closed, the Father named you before you drew breath. Faith here is not striving to believe something new. It is refusing to forget what you already know. Stand on the finished work. You are not defending a wall you must build. You are defending ground that has already, eternally, been taken. And now the last thing. You did not survive this war to merely enjoy it quietly. The leak is not meant to stop with you. Every secret you've had exposed in these pages is a secret the enemy is still keeping, right now, from someone you know, a brother still striving, a sister still condemned, a friend still convinced that God is a disappointed employer, and they are one mistake from being fired. They are fighting for a sonship they already possess. They are leaning on a painted door. You are now the one who knows. So go tell them. That is the commission. Not to win a war, it's won. Not to earn a standing, you have it. But to spread the breach. To take the one fact the enemy spent 6,000 years burying and say it out loud, plainly, to everyone still trapped in the dark. The war is over, the cross won it, and you are a son of God. The conspiracy unravels one exposed mind at a time, and you have been handed the exposure. Carry it the way an agent carries the one document that ends the war, not anxiously, but with the quiet certainty of someone who knows the contents change everything. You don't have to argue people free. You don't have to win them by force. You simply have to tell them the truth, the same truth that found you, and trust the spirit of truth to confirm it in them the way he confirmed it in you. The conspiracy was never strong. It was only secret. And secrecy is the one thing you now are built to destroy. So this is the commissioning. Not go and earn, not go and strive, go and tell. You have read the dossier the enemy spent 6,000 years trying to keep sealed. You know the secret. You are the leak he cannot plug, the witness he cannot silence, the son he cannot unname. The devil had one secret. You're the leak. Now go make it impossible to keep. Walk as a son, and tell the others they are sons too.